The story begins in a dark place, with weapons scattered everywhere. There, a young man looks exhausted but keeps pushing forward. He's heading towards a sword that's shining brightly. With a look full of anger and determination, our hero braces himself. Then, he lets out a scream with all his might towards the weapon. And in a desperate act, the boy bites the sword, which begins to shatter. Everything explodes in a bright light, and the scene shifts to our protagonist's past. In a grand hall, his father tells young Arhan to listen carefully. He explains that although they live far from the capital, 200 years ago, no one could compare to their family, because their ancestors were known as the gods of war and respected by all. Their family was chosen by the sword, and because of that, it produced several sword masters. Everyone called them the Invincible Guardians, a name that commanded great respect. And the name of this legendary family was Caravan. Right after, his father places a hand on the boy's shoulder and says he will be the next leader. Arhan would need to be proud of the blood of steel running through his veins. His mission was to restore the family's great name and protect these lands. This was the great mission for everyone in the Caravan family. The scene then cuts to the present, in a beautiful wheat field, and our guy, now older, starts to remember these stories. However, he thinks it's all just a bunch of fairy tales. After all, it's pretty common for fallen nobles to cling to made-up stories, because if the legends of the Caravan family were true, they wouldn't be stuck in a tiny village, and they certainly wouldn't be spending their days farming alongside the villagers as if they were one of them. But even while working hard, our guy kept thinking about all of it. Besides, his father's stories had a lot of plot holes that made zero sense. Starting with the family's founder, the man in that old portrait. He didn't look anything like Arhan or his father, and the sword looked way too perfect to be that old. And most importantly, in no history book in the kingdom was there a single mention of his ancestor named Liam Caravan. Putting all the pieces together, our protagonist came to the only possible conclusion. A villager then calls out to him, asking why he's just standing there. Another young man yells that it's time for the afternoon snack. Our guy panics and bolts so he doesn't miss out on his warm bread. But soon after, he stops and thinks that it doesn't matter if his family isn't so grand anymore, because all the people who took him in and love him are right there, and he loves this place where he can live in peace with everyone. This was the Caravan family our protagonist had always wished for. However, in the blink of an eye, all that peace and happiness was shattered, and our hero now found himself in the middle of a scene of pure destruction. He then realizes he was fooled by those peaceful days that were now over. The story rewinds a bit, to a day that seemed like any other. Arhan says goodbye to the villagers as he's heading to the market in the next town. Our protagonist says he'll take the opportunity to buy some things they need. He then asks his friend Kun if he wants some apples, and the young man's face lights up. On top of that, our hero remembers Marino's daughter's birthday and promises to bring back a doll. He brags a little, saying he knows about these things, because he's going to be the next lord. With that, our guy sets off on his horse, while the villagers wave at him. Everyone says goodbye to young Master Arhan, who smiles happily on his journey. The sun sets on the horizon, painting the wheat fields a golden color. The villagers comment on how kind Arhan is, different from all the other nobles. Kun then tells everyone to get back to work, so they don't fall further behind. But suddenly, the young man is hit by a quick, unexpected attack. A blade cuts through the air, and an old woman watches everything, completely terrified. She screams Kun's name in despair as a red liquid goes flying. The woman is in shock, unable to process what just happened. The once peaceful wheat field is now stained red. Then, a mysterious man appears, saying that this territory must be erased. The villagers tremble with fear, wondering who this unknown intruder is. The man's gaze is cold and shows not a shred of remorse for what he's done. And without hesitation, he prepares to strike another innocent villager in the field. The mysterious man repeats that this territory needs to be eliminated. Then, with a single motion, he attacks all the villagers at once. And without showing any emotion, he continues his merciless assault. The intruder then turns and walks away, his mission there now complete. At that moment, our guy arrives and drops the apples and the doll on the ground. Seeing all the bodies scattered around, he is completely frozen. Aran breaks into a cold sweat, unable to believe what he's seeing. He wonders why everyone he loved was lying there, lifeless on the ground. Suddenly, his butler appears from behind and covers our protagonist's eyes. Crying hard, the man hugs him and tells the young master not to look at the scene. Our hero, still in shock, doesn't understand what's happening and calls out for the butler. The poor man can't hold back his tears of sadness and despair. Arhan then begins to scream and cry desperately for the villagers. The butler reveals that the man they had feared so much had finally arrived, and that in just 10 minutes, he destroyed everything, saying the caravan family had to disappear. In a flashback, we see the mysterious man mercilessly attacking everyone. He invaded the village without any warning and started attacking the residents. With his cold, emotionless blade, he took the lives of half the people. And not satisfied, he also destroyed all the houses in that poor village. The man then stands still amidst the destruction, his objective completed, and just like that, half of the caravan family disappeared for no apparent reason. All because the mysterious man said he was just following orders. After all, a single sword master was enough to cause all that disaster. The scene shifts to the large caravan family mansion at night. Inside, however, the scene was one of pure destruction and chaos everywhere. Our guy Arhan observed it all, completely stunned. The shock and terror were visible on his face as he looked at the bodies. Because amidst it all, he saw his friend Kun lying there on the floor. Our protagonist then falls into despair and starts screaming nonstop. But a familiar voice calls out to him, and our hero looks to the side, surprised. It was his mother, running towards him with a worried look on her face. She was his only ray of hope in the middle of all that mess. The woman hugs him tightly and cries with relief to see he's okay. The hug was tight, and our guy returns it with the same intensity. For a moment, the warmth of that embrace brought him a bit of relief. However, as the camera pans out, we see the reality was quite different. The one standing there was his father, wondering why this whole catastrophe happened, because the tragedy that struck the caravan family was just beginning. The sword master didn't harm Arhan's parents, but left a warning. There, our hero's father was on the ground, defeated, with his sword broken. The intruder said he would be back in 1 month, and they should run if they wanted to live. The poor man then begins to cry, asking himself why this happened. In a scream of despair, he questions what sin they committed. Arhan's father remains on the floor, wondering about the reason for all this. But the mysterious man just replies with a cold, indifferent tone that he is simply carrying out the orders he was given. And after saying those meaningless words, he leaves the village. Frightened, the surviving villagers began to leave the place one by one, as this seemed to be the only way for them to save their lives. However, our protagonist's family was not given the same permission. Crushed by the responsibility, his father begins to completely lose his mind. Because of his father, our hero wouldn't give up on protecting that place. At that moment, his mother appears and calls him for a serious talk. She says the butler has already prepared a carriage for him to escape. Our guy panics and says they all need to leave together. However, she explains that the Lord can't abandon this place, as he will fight as the Lord of Caravan, and she will stay by his side. Our protagonist begs his mother not to do this, and to go with him. It's then that she reveals that the stories his father told weren't true. All the tales about guardians and watchers were nothing but lies. Our hero is in shock and can't believe what he has just heard. His mother then asks him to make a very important promise, that he would never pick up a sword again and would live only for himself. The butler then announces that the carriage is ready as the mother holds our hero. She then asks him to take good care of Arhan and to go as far as he can. The man obeys and holds the boy, who is screaming desperately for his mother. With a sad but determined look, she prepares for what's to come. Our protagonist continues to struggle and yell as he's carried away by force. He even tries to reach out for her one last time, but it's useless. His mother then says goodbye with a sad smile, telling him she loves him very much. The scene cuts to the mansion, where the situation was not good at all. Arhan's father was completely lost amidst the scattered books. Pain and despair were taking over the poor man at that moment. He could barely stand after everything that had happened. His wife then hugs him from behind, asking him to stop suffering alone, because she would stay with him until the end, to face whatever came together. Far away, the butler was driving the carriage through the dark forest. He thinks about how Arhan needs to overcome the pain, and calls the enemy a disaster, because to him, that man was like a calamity that couldn't be avoided. He believes the young master needs to accept the tragedy to survive, and that surely his parents would want him to do exactly that. But suddenly, he turns around and calls out for our guy, very worried, because our protagonist had jumped from the carriage and was running back to the mansion. Running through the forest, our protagonist says he can't go alone, because he simply can't run away and abandon his parents. So, with all his strength, he yells that he's not going to escape like that. After all, a sword master is still human and can be defeated. Besides, over the last month, he managed to get a fatal poison to use. With this plan, he arrives at the mansion, believing he can save them both. However, upon seeing the scene in front of him, he is completely paralyzed. His eyes widen in pure horror at what he was seeing, because the result of this hunt is displayed on the family's flagpole. A horrific scene that left him completely speechless. The sword master then calls him a fool for coming back, and asks if our hero really came here to meet his end. The man is annoyed, because he had already shown mercy before. Our guy then lets out a scream of pure, uncontrolled pain and rage, because there on the ground was the body of his beloved mother, now lifeless. The woman he loved so much had left this world forever. Blinded by rage, Arhan grabs his crossbow and yells that he's going to finish him. The sword master faces him with a cold, challenging look. Without a second thought, our protagonist fires the poisoned arrow, and so begins the final showdown between the young man and the assassin. But the crossbow attack was useless, and the weapon falls to the ground, having no effect. Suddenly, our hero is thrown to his knees in front of the burning mansion. He starts to choke as the sword master is suffocating him with magic. The man says Arhan hasn't even turned 18, so he's lucky. So he spares our guy's life and tells him to go die in despair. He warns that if Arhan tries to continue the caravan lineage, he will return, and with a terrifying look, the sword master swears he will find him. With that, our protagonist's family would simply vanish from history. Our guy is left there on the ground, alone and completely helpless. He then crawls pathetically towards the body of his dear mother. Crying his heart out, our hero hugs her one last time, feeling all the pain. On that tragic day, our protagonist had lost absolutely everything, but suddenly his ancestor's old sword begins to glow with a blue light. Or at least, that's what our guy thought until that moment. A mysterious voice then tells Arhan Caravan to show his due respect. From the portrait on the wall, a very strong light shines, and a ghostly figure emerges. It was the spirit of his ancestor, the founder of the legendary Caravan family. 1 year has passed since the tragedy, and our hero has been preparing for his revenge. His enemy was known as the most powerful sword on the continent. Besides being a righteous guardian, he was a superhuman among sword masters. His name was Carlos, the master of 10 swords, and he took everything from our boy. But Arhan still didn't understand the reason for it all, or the secret of his family. However, one thing was certain: as he looked out over the graveyard, the lives of all those who were needlessly lost would never come back. The scene then flashes back to the moment our MC sees the blue light. He wonders if all the unanswered questions have finally made him lose his marbles. The look on our boy's face showed just how shocked and confused he was. A bluish energy starts to pour out of the sword hanging on the wall. The weapon glows intensely in front of our completely baffled hero, because something unbelievable was happening right before his very eyes. A mysterious voice then tells Arhan Caravan to show some proper respect. The spirit then introduces himself as his ancestor, Liam Caravan. The man he believed to be a myth had appeared, just like in the stories. Our MC then remembers hearing about something like this before, that people who suffer a great shock can start to have hallucinations. He clenches his fist, wondering if this is real or not. But calling it a hallucination was impossible. It felt way too real. Liam's spirit says he can feel our hero's heart wavering. He then asks if Arhan is afraid he's finally gone off the deep end. Our MC is stunned that the ancestor he thought was a delusion is right there. Arhan then asks if he's really the founder of his family. The spirit confirms he is Liam Caravan, the strongest sword master in history. Angrily, our boy questions why he decided to show up only now. He yells, asking why Liam waited until everything was already lost. His eyes burn with hatred, as he can't understand his ancestors' delay. Liam, however, stays calm and begins to explain the situation. He says he needed to confirm something because revenge demands that you give up everything. That's why he watched our hero for a year and saw his, let's say, less than stellar talent. But despite that, Arhan never let go of his sword and trained every single day. His will to fight didn't fade for even a single moment. Liam then repeats Artian's question about why he's appearing now. The answer is simple. The hatred in the boy's eyes has reached the level he was waiting for. Besides, Liam's own patience with the situation had run out, because he also wanted to destroy the man who attacked his descendants. The ancestor then reveals that only a sword master can defeat another. He holds out his hand to Arhan and says that's why the boy has trained so hard. However, Liam warns that our hero will never be able to reach him on his own. Liam explains that a sword master is a being who has transcended humanity, and among them Carlos is a supreme being, something rare even back in the age of war. That's why in this era, no one can defeat him, and as time goes on, he will only get stronger, leaving our hero shocked by the revelation. Arhan's face goes pale, as he knows all too well the power gap between them. He then wonders if he's supposed to just stand by and watch Carlos be hailed as a hero. Our boy remembers his own powerlessness on that terrible, hopeless day. But Liam says that from now on, everything is going to change because he's here to help. The ancestor promises to forge Arhan into a blade stronger than Carlos's, so that, as a caravan, he can finally bring judgment down on that monster. Liam reveals there is only one path, a path that only those of his bloodline can follow. And the solution to all of this is for our hero to simply devour his sword. Arhan is stunned, realizing he is the descendant who inherited the blood of steel. The scene changes to a forge, filled with weapons and equipment everywhere. The fire from the furnace burns intensely, illuminating the dark space. A sword with red details glows in the heat of the roaring fire. The camera pans up, showing more of the place, which looks like an ancient workshop. Liam then reveals the great family secret. They have both human and dwarven blood. With a look of determination, our boy prepares for what comes next. He approaches the glowing sword with his ancestor by his side, guiding him. Liam explains that the dwarven traits aren't visible, but a special ability was passed down. This ability has to do with swords. By consuming one, you gain the owner's memories and techniques. And this was the source of power that allowed the caravans to produce so many sword masters. Our boy finds this incredibly weird, as he's never heard of anything like it. It all seems absurd and leaves him confused, but he keeps holding the sword. However, the truth is proven by results, and he has no more time to hesitate. With a look full of determination, Arhan asks his ancestor to teach him how to consume the weapon. Liam then gives a small, satisfied smile at his descendant's courage. He explains that the method is simple. First, you heat the blade until it's soft, and then you just chew and swallow. Our MC starts sweating bullets at the idea. Our boy's eye twitches, but his determination for revenge is stronger. He thinks he might be in a nightmare or bewitched by a ghost. But even if there's the slightest chance it could work, he's going to try it, because he can't waste any more time and needs to get stronger fast. Then, with all his might, he screams that he'll do whatever it takes. Our hero bites down on the hot sword, which shatters into 1,000 pieces in his mouth. He groans in pain as the blade's power begins to flow into his body. His hand feels like it's on fire amidst all that hot red energy. Our boy's body is then consumed by flames. The pain is so immense that he lets out a final scream as the transformation happens. Amidst the flames, our boy continues to scream in pure agony. Meanwhile, a piece of the sword falls to the ground, still glowing intensely. His entire body begins to glow, and the pain seems unbearable. He then collapses to the floor, writhing and screaming from the power. Our hero can barely breathe as the transformation continues. With tears in his eyes, he holds on, refusing to give up on his goal. In his mind, a single phrase echoes, telling him not to forget anything. He remembers all the villagers who were lost on that tragic day, and he also remembers his mother, who he couldn't protect. But most of all, he remembers Carlos, the man who caused all of this. His hand begins to change, and a dark energy pulses through his veins. With new power coursing through his body, he clenches his fist tightly, and a smile of pure determination appears on his tired face. Because he will become whatever it takes to get his revenge. Erhan swears he will become a sword master to defeat Carlos. The scene cuts to the next morning in a quiet house. But inside, our boy wakes up screaming his head off. He then realizes he's still alive, and just can't believe it. Erhan remembers the pain of chewing on the sword, but doesn't have a single scratch on him. He then wonders if the whole thing was just one big nightmare. However, upon seeing the sword's hilt on the floor, he knows it was all real. The ancestor's voice says that his body is way too weak, but his mental strength is actually pretty decent for a human. The spirit then reveals that many of his ancestors gave up because of the pain. He then asks if our hero now believes in the legends of the Caravan family. Erhan is floored, realizing it wasn't a hallucination. With his hand on the ground, he introduces himself as Erhan Caravan, and in a sign of respect, he kneels to greet the founder. However, the ancestor tells him to just call him master, because everyone who received his teachings called him that. Our boy then looks up and starts to ask a question. He wants to know if he managed to inherit the master's great power. After all, the spirit said that if he ate the sword, he would gain its strength. However, our MC points out that nothing seems to have changed about his body. The master then says a problem came up, and it's all Erhan's fault. Our boy is confused and asks what the master means by that. The ancestor explains that his plan was to turn Erhan into a sword master. However, since the family bloodline has weakened, his ability to digest it has vanished. Long story short, in his current state, it's impossible to digest that sword's essence. Our MC then kneels on the floor, seemingly accepting the situation. He just says that he understands, and if the master says so, it must be true. The ancestor is surprised by the kid's calm demeanor and asks if that's it. Erhan replies that he already knew about his body's weakness, and that he's grateful because he realized there's still a different path for him to follow. Because if it's impossible now, it means that one day he will be able to digest the power. With a determined look, our hero says he just needs to find the right sword. The master smiles and says his intelligence is already that of a sword master. He then tells Erhan to take him to a place with lots of old, worn-out weapons. The scene then cuts to a giant junkyard filled with broken weapons. The ancestor says he'll personally choose the right weapon for the boy. The master also comments that the place is filled with a dark energy. Our MC explains that old things from the slums end up here, from useless scrap to weapons that can no longer be used in battle. That's why this was the perfect place to start his journey. The ancestor then reveals that in the beginning, he also devoured swords just like these. The ancestor says he ate and ate with all his might, because he needed to get strong enough to survive. In his past, he had to face all sorts of enemies, and that was his first strike to begin his journey. The scene then cuts to our hero facing an intruder. With a single blow, he sends the muscular guy flying backward. The invader then hits the ground, completely defeated and out for the count. The man's friends just stare, not believing what just happened. They're all in shock at our boy's speed. One of them even asks if this is all some kind of joke. However, Erhan braces himself to attack the rest of the group without fear. From a distance, the ancestor's spirit watched everything carefully. He then reveals that over the last month, he taught Erhan only one thing. Our boy went through physical training so he wouldn't get tired in battle, but the master never taught him a single sword technique. Even so, the fact that he can attack like that proves one thing. The ancestor then tells our hero to show them his power. He needs to take his first step as a true caravan. That scene reminds the master of his own past. He remembers how he fought to protect life in that chaotic place. The ancestor says that those were the battlefields of old, because in a fight, many lives are lost, but something is always left behind. And that something was a single, shining point of light in the midst of the darkness. With a serious look, the master says he's finally found what he was looking for. He then points and tells our boy to grab that special item, because that was the second sword our hero needed to eat. The scene cuts to 1 month later in front of the Caravan family mansion. A group of men comment that the place and the village seem empty. Without a care in the world, they walk into the completely abandoned mansion. One of them thinks it must be the hideout of some bankrupt noble. They then start to explore the large main hall of the house. One of the intruders says the place smells like old money everywhere. The men are thrilled, thinking this job is going to be a piece of cake. Suddenly, one of them notices something and is surprised by what he sees. He says the place looks like a young noble lady's room, because he found a pile of neatly folded women's clothes there. One of the men picks up something he found in the mansion. The other intruder thinks that now they can finally rest. Meanwhile, another one yells, asking to see what he found too. But one of the group's leaders tells them all to stop messing around. Suddenly, a silhouette appears in the darkness of the doorway, startling everyone. A voice says that his mother liked things clean and hated a mess. Then our boy reveals himself and tells them to put the clothes back where they found them. The intruders are completely clueless and look at the kid, confused. The bold guy asks if he's the owner's son, and is surprised it's not a girl. Our hero asks if they came looking for food or a place to stay, and says if that's the case, he can accept them as neighbors. The bold man thinks our MC has got to be out of his mind. He then thinks about how these nobles aren't afraid of anything. The intruder gets annoyed and says Arhan should have just stayed quiet and hidden. Our boy just closes his eyes with a serious expression on his face. The bald guy loses his patience and charges, yelling if he wants to meet his end. But Arhan opens his eyes, which are now glowing with an intense purple light. The color then shifts to a fiery red, full of rage and power. In one swift move, our hero lunges forward and attacks the intruder without hesitation. The blade goes right through the man's chest, who is frozen in pain. Our MC then reveals that they were intruders, not guests. The crimson spray flies everywhere, splashing across our boy's face. The scene then cuts to a fireplace with a fire burning intensely. The flames dance on the wood, signaling the end of that swift confrontation. The story then flashes back a bit to show our boy in front of the fireplace. He's holding a thin sword and asks the master if this is the one he should eat, because the weapon looks a lot more like a needle than a real sword. Our hero even says it looks fragile and would break easily, but the ancestor disagrees, because that weapon wasn't made for cutting or breaking things. The master reveals it was created for a single, deadly purpose. In a decisive battle, it's used to pierce an enemy's vital point, like an assassin's tool to end a life in a single blow. In other words, that was a sword made only for piercing. Our MC is surprised and thinks a spear would be better for that. The ancestor senses his doubt but says that for his weak body, this is perfect, because the most important thing are the memories stored within that sword. To Arhan's surprise, the master reveals that the owner of that weapon managed to pierce the life out of more than 200 enemies all by herself, and she did all that with a woman's body, even thinner than our hero's. So he tells the boy to show some respect and consume the sword with gratitude, because the weight of the metal might feel light in his hands, but the life and the history within it are heavier than anything else. By inheriting that woman's memories, our MC would gain many things. The scene snaps back to the present, with the man our hero attacked choking on the ground. He then goes limp, the blow having struck his lungs with surgical precision, but he only managed to do it for one very important reason. By consuming the needle sword, he inherited all the memories of its former owner, Mary. In these memories, the old swordsman Hegel taught the young girl many things. He taught her how to hold a sword, how to fight, and even how to survive. Although it wasn't a formal technique or some kind of elite training, Hegel's swordsmanship carried the romance and freedom of a wandering knight. And for a girl who once had a terrifying fear of fire, that strength he passed on to her was something breathtakingly beautiful. That's why young Mary says with a smile that she truly loved the sword and all the teachings from that old man named Hegel. A few years later, the swordsman was old and sick, lying in his bed. He takes the young woman's hand and asks her to go see the world out there, because that was the last and most important lesson he could leave for her. With tears in her eyes, Mary hears Hegel say that his journey ended right by her side. The old master then calls the girl's name one last time before passing on. She thanks him for everything and says her goodbyes, asking him to rest in peace. After that final lesson, Mary finally left the orphanage and set out into the world. In no time, Mary made a name for herself as a well-known mercenary. Maybe it was because she used a strange sword, or because she was a young woman, but everyone called her by a nickname that marked her story. The Stitching Wanderer, a name that echoed across every battlefield. Our boy understands that this is what the master called digestion, and Mary's memories begin to flow into his mind like a river. The other invader who survived desperately begs for his life. But our protagonist approaches, gripping his weapon firmly, and without a moment's hesitation, he pierces the man's heart to finish the job. The red stuff drips down the blade and onto the invader's body. Our hero then thinks that he needs to make sure the work is done. He kneels beside the body and realizes this was his first kill, but despite that, he doesn't feel any emotion or remorse for what he did. All he can see is the situation he needs to solve right in front of him. He knows he only won because the man underestimated him and let his guard down. Our guy then wonders why the others aren't ganging up on him. The remaining invaders look spooked, afraid to move forward. The ancestor then says that they're terrified of our protagonist, because the move he just pulled off was not something any beginner could do. One of them even asks what they should do, but the other has no idea either. The master smiles and says that fear makes the enemy in front of them seem larger than life, because to them our hero now looks like a skilled demon with a blade. Our protagonist then understands what he needs to do in that moment, and with a flick of his wrist, he tosses his thin sword into the air as a distraction. Immediately after, he charges toward the surprised invaders. Our hero says with a serious look that now is the time to strike. One of the men desperately screams for Arhan to stay back, but he rushes at our boy with all his might. However, our protagonist dodges the attack with a swift movement. His gaze is cold and focused on the next step of his plan. The invader is in shock when he sees his blow hit nothing but air, and with incredible precision, our hero strikes the man's neck. He then remembers an old lesson that Master Hegel taught, because as a woman, time would never be on her side in a battle. The other invader lets out a scream and readies a desperate attack. He lunges forward with all his strength to try and hit our guy. His weapon cuts through the air in a powerful, rage-filled swing. That's why she had to end things in the first or second strike. And using that lesson, our hero attacks the man mid-swing. The invader is frozen in pain from the pinpoint strike to his neck. Hegel's final lesson was that she had to pierce the enemy, no matter what, because you shouldn't compensate for what you lack, but rather make what you have shine. The last invader charges forward with a look full of hatred and rage. And using Mary's memories, our hero remembers that his strength is flexibility. With a dancer's body, she could attack from any posture, and from any possible angle, catching all of her enemies by surprise. She then spins her body in mid-air, in an impressive acrobatic move. The invader is completely stunned by the agility of that attack, and just like that, she could aim for the lifeline and end it all at once. The man then chokes and falls to the ground, unable to believe what just happened. With the last enemy defeated, the battle at the mansion finally comes to an end. But there was still one survivor, looking at our boy in pure terror. He held a dagger, trembling, unable to move from sheer fear. The poor guy doesn't understand what that thing in front of him is, because to him, our hero was nothing more than a merciless demon. The scene then cuts to the dark forest, under the light of the full moon. There, our protagonist is digging to bury the invaders' bodies. The ancestor then appears and asks if he still has any doubts, because if he has the stamina to swing a sword all day without getting tired, those 4 untrained thugs would be no match for him alone. The ancestor says that a caravan gets even stronger in a fight for survival. Our boy then realizes that everything the master said was the absolute truth. From his flexible body to Mary's vivid memories, it all fit together, and slowly he began to understand what was happening much better. He felt the determination with which that woman fought against the world. Our hero then understands that the more he comprehends his opponent, the stronger he gets. He wonders if this is the true power of the so-called digestion. The master then calls out to him and says he never tells a lie when it comes to swords. He warns that the days ahead will be filled with pain and difficult trials, to the point where what he went through today will seem like a walk in the park. The ancestor then asks if, even so, he can follow this path. Our protagonist says that if he can point his blade at Carlos's neck, no matter what the path is, he'll keep moving forward. But suddenly, he calls for the master, shocked by what he sees. The ancestor was holding on to him to keep him from falling off a steep cliff. Our boy then wonders if this path is really the right one. He looks down and sees the frightening height of the mountain he has to climb, and with a bit of fear, he asks if this is really necessary. The master then asks him where that determined look from yesterday went, and says that doubt has been one of his strengths since he was just a child. The master then says he'll satisfy our boy's curiosity. He explains that the path of the swordsman is divided into 5 stages. After that comes the sword expert, and finally, the sword master. The ancestor says that above them all is the revered sword god, a title given to the one who has reached the realm of the mind blade. The master then asks our hero which of these stages he fits into. With a smile, our protagonist says he knows his own level quite well. He explains that the prerequisite to be a sword master is to manipulate mana. And to do that, one must form a mana heart, the body's second heart. Since he doesn't have a mana heart yet, he doesn't even qualify as a beginner. The ancestor says his self-awareness is exceptionally sharp, and that he hasn't even stepped onto the entrance of the sword path yet, but that this training is meant to guide him on the path of a beginner. Our guy is shocked to learn that all of this is to create a mana heart. He asks if he's risking his life just to form a mana heart, because he knows he could kick the bucket at any moment in this dangerous place. The master says that nowadays, with an alchemist's potion, or with the help of a knight, it's possible to awaken one's senses to mana. Even young ladies who only learn self-defense swordsmanship can do it. Our hero then doesn't understand why he has to follow such a difficult method. The master says that forming a mana heart isn't hard following the world's methods. But the blood of the caravan carries the power of steel and needs a strong vessel, and for that reason, an ordinary person's heart would never be enough for them. If he truly wishes to reach the path of a sword master, he needs something that won't get scratched when it collides with the world, a heart of steel. The ancestor reveals that there is only one way to forge this heart, by forcing his own body to need a mana heart, pushing it to the absolute limit. He says that few of his descendants managed to complete the training, because the process was extremely painful and terrifying for anyone. However, those who endured until the end became sword masters. He then asks if that motivates him, at least a little, to continue. With a look full of determination, our boy grips the rock, and says with a smile that it's more than enough for him. The master smiles and says that the mana heart he will achieve, with all that determination and tireless effort he's showing, will be completely different from any other that exists in this world. The scene then cuts to nightfall in a village in the Verdi region. In a tavern, a few men are talking about a strange rumor. One of them asks if they've heard about the western village called Caravan, because apparently there's something very dangerous and mysterious over there. The man in the tavern says that all the troublemakers who go there simply vanish without a trace. Furthermore, he says the only conclusion is to not enter the village if you don't want to check out for good. Sitting at a table, a mysterious man listens to the whole conversation in silence. He then thinks to himself that it's a village you enter but never leave. The man then starts cleaning a wound on his neck with a cloth. It seems he just got out of a big tough battle, and even with all the danger, he decides that place is his destination. Strength for Mary. With a huge smile on her face, she remembers that she truly loved the way Hegel fought. A few years passed, and the girl continued training with her master and great friend. Lying in his bed, the man says the day she will have to leave this place will come. Hegel holds her hand tightly and asks her to go out into the world when that day comes. With weak breaths, he says that this is his last lesson as her teacher. With tears in his eyes, the man says he is happy that the end of his journey was with her. Mary cries desperately and squeezes her master's hand as he says his final goodbye. Sitting beside the body, the girl thanks him for everything and wishes her friend to rest in peace. After that, following Hegel's last lesson, she left the orphanage and set out into the world. Right after, she became a well-known mercenary for her unique skills. Perhaps it was because of her needle, thin sword, or because she was a young woman in that line of work. Because of this, people began to call her by a very specific and famous name. Over time, she became known everywhere as the fearsome gypsy seamstress. Arahan understands that this is digestion, and her memories flow into his mind like a river. Back in the present, the intruder begs for his life and asks our protagonist to stop everything, but the boy just grips the hilt of his weapon tighter and stares at him coldly without saying a word. Without any hesitation, he attacks again to end the man's suffering once and for all. The blade pierces the intruder with precision, and our protagonist shows no emotion. With a cold look, he says he will make sure to finish the job once and for all. Kneeling beside the body, our protagonist reflects that this was his first time. However, even though it's his first time, he feels absolutely no emotion. All he can see is the situation in front of him and what needs to be done now. He knows the man underestimated him, so he can't expect to have the same luck again. With this, he wonders why the intruders don't attack him, even though they outnumber him. The bandits just stand there in fear and don't take advantage of the numbers they have over Arhan. At that moment, Liam's spirit appears and says the men are completely terrified of him. Faced with the situation, he adds that what our protagonist showed were not the moves of a novice. The master explains that excessive fear hinders judgment and leaves them totally paralyzed. This type of fear makes the enemy seem much bigger and more powerful than he really is. Therefore, to them, Arhan is a skilled demon with a sword and nothing less. Our protagonist then gives a smirk and perfectly understands the situation of his targets. From there, he kicks off the ground and prepares to attack the intruders with all his speed. With a glint in his eyes, our protagonist rushes toward the bandits, who scream in fear. Faced with the situation, one of the men begs Arhan not to come any closer to him at all. The intruder then attacks with everything he has and shouts that he will finish our protagonist right there. However, the boy dodges the blow with ease and slides across the floor with great agility. In the blink of an eye, he appears behind the man, who is shocked by his speed. Right after, our protagonist attacks him from behind and hits him squarely with a precise strike. With a dirty face, our protagonist remembers a lesson Hegel gave to Mary. The master explained that since she lacked strength, time would never be on her side. With that, the enemy just screamed in pain as she relentlessly attacked him. The girl moved with impressive speed, using her agility to attack. For this reason, she needed to end everything in the first or second strike. Our protagonist applies the lesson and attacks the bandit with surgical precision. The man is completely in shock, as he did not expect such a blow. From there, the goal was just one, to pierce the enemy with a precise attack. Hegel taught her not to focus on what she lacked, but to make what she already had shine. One of the opponents glares at her with pure rage, unable to follow her movements. Therefore, her great strength was her flexibility and a body like a dancer's. With these unique movements, she could move in a completely unpredictable way. Because of this, her targets were shocked, not knowing from which angle the blow would come. The woman used her flexibility to attack from any position, even upside down. In this way, she finished the opponent with a fatal blow coming from an impossible angle. This way, he can perfectly aim for the lifeline of any of his enemies. The man chokes, and his eye turns completely red as he falls to the ground, gone in an instant. Our protagonist then pulls out his weapon, and the intruder's body falls to the side, completely limp. The last remaining bandit is in shock and stutters, unable to believe what he's seeing. Completely terrified, he grabs his dagger and prepares to fight our protagonist. With trembling hands, the man wonders what that is, as it doesn't seem human. In his mind, he sees Arhan as a murderous demon and wonders what he really is. The scene then shifts to a forest at night, with the full moon shining brightly in the sky. Down below, our protagonist buries the intruders' bodies to clean up the mess they made. Liam then appears and asks if the boy can finally put his doubts about the power aside. He reminds him that if Arhan has the stamina to fight all day without stopping, nothing can defeat him. Therefore, against 4 untrained bandits, he could easily handle them alone. With a smile on his face, the master says that his descendant is growing through battles. Our protagonist realizes that everything his master said was true, and that he can trust him. After all, his body became flexible, and Mary's memories became clear as soon as the fight began. With this, he finally understands with what kind of heart the girl fought against the world. Our protagonist then wonders, this is what his master was talking about all along. The power of digestion that makes him stronger the more he understands his opponent. Faced with the situation, the spirit says he never lies when it comes to swords and power. From there, he warns that Arhan's days will be filled with terrible pain and hardship, and that today's suffering will seem like a blessing compared to what's to come in the future. Therefore, Liam looks at him and asks if he can still walk this path of pain. Our protagonist clenches his fist and says that if he can aim for Carlos, he can endure anything. With a determined look, he shouts that he will continue no matter what happens to him, master. But suddenly, Arhan's expression changes, and he is shocked by what he sees in front of him. He starts climbing a cliff and wonders if this path is really the right direction. The scene pulls back and shows our protagonist climbing a giant and dangerous mountain. The camera pans up and reveals that the top of the mountain is still very far from being reached. From a distance, the climb seems even more impossible, and the boy keeps wondering if this is for real. Liam then scolds him and asks where yesterday's look went and if the doubt has returned. With that, the spirit says this is one of his strengths and that he's been like this since he was a child. Faced with the situation, the ancestor says that one day he will need this, but for now, he will satisfy his curiosity. From there, he explains that the swordsman's path has 5 stages. The first is beginner, and the second is wanderer. Right after comes the sword runner, who is already considered the strong axis of the battlefield. The 4th level is the expert, a hero who can change the war alone, and above him is the one revered as a god. All other knights bow before a sword master with great respect and admiration. This is the realm of the sword master, and Liam asks the boy at what level he thinks he is now. Our protagonist is quiet for a moment, thinking carefully about his master's question. With a mocking smile, he says he knows Liam wants an excited answer, but he knows his level very well. He explains that the requirement to be a sword master is to manipulate mana and create a mana heart. Because of this, he states that since he hasn't formed a mana heart, he doesn't even qualify as a beginner. The spirit then smiles and agrees, saying that he is truly an amateur among amateurs. Liam adds that the boy hasn't even entered the path of the sword, and that this training is to guide him to the beginner level. Therefore, the goal of all this climbing is just to create a mana heart in his body. Our protagonist then asks, shocked, if they are taking all this risk just for him to form a mana heart. Our protagonist shouts that he could be gone at any moment in this dangerous place. He says he doesn't know how it was in his master's time, but nowadays, you just drink an alchemist's potion, or a wandering knight can infuse mana to open the senses, and that's enough. Because of this, he says that even young ladies who only train for defense can form a mana heart. Therefore, he wonders why his master insists on this difficult and dangerous method. With his face all sweaty, he says he simply can't understand the reason for so much effort. The spirit then agrees that forming a mana heart isn't difficult, and there's nothing wrong with the common methods. But he reveals that the power of Gunson's steel lies in the blood of the Caravan family. Because of this, to release this power, a strong vessel is needed, and a common person's won't do. Therefore, he says that if Arhan really wants to reach the path of a sword master, he needs one thing. That thing is a heart of steel that won't be scratched even if it clashes with the whole world. The ancestor then reveals that there is only one way to forge such a heart. He must push himself to the brink of his end, so that his body desires a mana heart on its own. Liam admits that few of his descendants completed this training because it is a horrible process. However, he states that those who endured the entire training until the end achieved the power. Liam adds that those who endure the training become masters, and asks what Arhan thinks. The spirit then questions his young descendant if he finally feels motivated to continue. With that, our protagonist clenches his hand on the rock with renewed strength and full of determination. He then replies with a smile that this is more than enough to motivate him to proceed. The ancestor smiles with satisfaction and says he never lies when it comes to swords and their power. Because of this, he guarantees that the mana heart our protagonist will get will be different. It will be a unique power, different from anyone else's in the world, and he continues the climb. The scene then shifts to Campbell Village in the Verde region during a calm, full moon night. Inside a tavern, a man asks if the others have heard the rumor about the western village called Caravan. Another responds that it's the place where no one has been found for a year and asks about the current rumor. The man says there's something in the village, and the other asks what it is, but he can't say for sure. He only knows it's dangerous because every rogue who set foot there simply vanished from the map. There are rumors of monsters, or even a warlock conducting experiments, but they all reach one conclusion. The only certainty is that, if you don't want to meet your end, you'd better not enter that village at all. Meanwhile, a masked person listens to the entire conversation in silence at the tavern counter without saying a word. The mysterious person grips their cup upon hearing that it's a village you enter to perish. Right after, they wipe their mouth with a cloth, revealing a wound that won't stop bleeding. Faced with the situation, they think to themselves that this place seems simply perfect for them. From that day on, he started to hold onto the cliff using only his left hand. On top of that, the young man took care of intruders at the mansion even when he was completely exhausted. Amidst terrible muscle pain, he continued his intense physical training, but he went through all of this without missing a single day of heavy training, always giving it his all with every ounce of his strength. And so, 1 month passed in the story, and the young man wonders if he managed to form a mana heart. Unfortunately, the young man couldn't reach his goal and failed. However, upon looking at his hand, he notices something is different. Then, the protagonist realizes that a clear change is happening to his body. With that, the scene changes to a training room where we see a giant pendulum. One of these changes is that his senses became much sharper. With this, the young man can dodge attacks more easily. His senses are now incredibly sharp, allowing him to see everything. Meanwhile, an enemy attacks him relentlessly with his chain weapon. But it's not just his 5 senses like sight and hearing that have improved. Nimbly dodging the blows, the boy prepares for a counterattack. He ducks, narrowly escaping being hit by the opponent's attack. His skills are now incomparable to what they were before the training, and every time he wields the needle, something happens. When the young man focuses on a single point, his perception expands. For a brief moment, the enemy lunges forward with a desperate attack. Then, the young man swiftly dodges the opponent's strikes in a quick motion. Holding his needle firmly, the young man readies himself for the counter-attack. In that moment, he feels as if time has stopped for everyone but him. With a swift movement, the protagonist evades the enemy's attack. Then, he positions himself to strike while everything around him is still. At this, the opponent's expression changes to pure shock and fear. In an instant, a drop of blood flies through the air, showing the precise attack. The boy's gaze remains calm and focused, even in the midst of battle. Then, several points of light appear on the adversary's body, indicating the strikes, and with a single final blow, the protagonist strikes the enemy's chest. In that moment, the young man reflects on the difference between his former self and who he is now. He realizes that the reason for this change is just one thing. The big reveal is that he can now feel the man around him. The needle he used in the battle now lies on the ground. All around, we see several other weapons stuck in the ground of the training field. His master watches everything from a distance, impressed with his disciple's progress. The young man thinks this is thanks to the needle's power, but it's still an incredible feat. Then he calls his master and asks what kind of power he will have at the next level. The old man tells him not to get excited about something so trivial, but says he will answer his question. He explains that only then will the young man be on equal footing with the needle's owner. Through the path emitted by the mana heart, he will be able to enhance his skills. This will lead him to the realm of superhumans, a level the world calls a sword wanderer. The master warns that although it's the next stage, the power difference is gigantic. With that, the old man asks if he has answered the question, and the young man confirms he understood everything. Then the boy says he has one more question about something he's feeling at the moment. He mentions that a man entered the territory a while ago and has settled there. The scene then changes to a sunset with flames falling from the sky. We see the sword of a mysterious man who is sitting amidst ruins. This man is covered by a very powerful red and green mana aura. The protagonist then asks if that man is a sword wanderer. His master confirms it and says that guy's level is completely different from anything he's ever seen. The old man questions what he will do, as he wouldn't last a second, and the young man decides to observe. His tutor suggests he abandon the territory to avoid a fight he can't win, but the young man firmly states that this is not one of his options. Even though a lot of time has passed and the place is desolate, he can't leave. That is the only place that holds the memories of everyone who lived there. The master falls silent, seeming to understand his disciple's determination. The boy then turns around and starts to walk away from that place. In the end, the old man floats and tells his young descendant to become stronger. The master says that in this iron realm, only the strong have the answer, and his desire is a luxury. With that, he advises the young man to use his emotions as strength to get what he wants. Then the tutor tells him to feed on this ordeal and become as hard as steel. That way, no one will ever dare to laugh at his words in the future. And it seems his master's words reached him, as his sword glows with blue mana. At another moment, the mysterious man finds him and warns him not to even think about running. At this moment, the protagonist gets scared but holds a combat stance with his needle. The sword wanderer points his shining blade at the boy and threatens him. Then the mysterious man says that if the young man shows his back, something will happen. He finishes the sentence by saying he will cut him down right there without mercy. With sweat trickling down his face, the young man realizes an unexpected challenge has arrived. After the mysterious man set foot in the territory, a heavy rain began to fall. Observing him became part of our protagonist's new daily routine. What he learned during this observation process was something very clear. Even though the village was full of empty houses, he never touched anything. Furthermore, the man lived a simple life with only the belongings he brought. If there were other characteristics, it was that he would get lost in thought watching the sunset, or he would be praying alone in the middle of the dark forest at night. Thus, the conclusion the young man came to was that this guest seemed to be a knight. The master agrees and says he is a swordsman who follows rules even when no one is watching. Such inflexible people are rare to find unless they are knights. The boy then says he might not be a bad neighbor, since knights seek justice. But his master says it's misleading to call them just, even though they seek honor. By nature, honor is something very subjective and isn't good for everyone. A knight's honor is defined by the loyalty sworn to their employer. Then the old man says he will teach him the true meaning of being a knight. He explains that a knight is just a swordsman who uses force and is an enforcer. The tutor advises him not to be deceived by the word and to judge the target's essence. He reveals that the precious talent the young man possesses is the ability to doubt. Surprised, the young man wonders if doubting is really his special talent. The master reminds him that he has always been this way since childhood. While listening to his father's legends, he always sought the truth behind them. Even in dangerous situations where power could corrupt him, he stood firm. The young man always found the answer by eliminating variables with his observation. Doubting is the attitude of using all means to try to reach the truth. Those who don't know how to doubt can never cross their limits, and he must not lose that. Because that is his true talent for the sword. The young man finally understands and replies that he has understood everything. He then says he will keep that in mind while observing the mysterious man. And no matter what he was taught, he never let his guard down around the stranger. After analyzing the situation carefully, the young man realizes the stranger doesn't seem like a threat and decides to approach very slowly. But suddenly, the warrior draws his shining blade and reveals he knew of the boy's presence all along. At this, the swordsman points his weapon and warns the boy not to even try to flee from that place. With that, the protagonist freezes in fright, holding his combat needle with trembling hands. Then, the intruder brings the tip of his sword to the little one's face and begins to make a terrible threat. In that moment, the man says that if the young man dares to show his back to him, the consequences will be dire. He guarantees with a cold look that he will cut the blonde boy down right there without any hesitation or mercy. Breaking into a cold sweat, the boy realizes the situation has become much more dangerous than he initially imagined. He grips the handle of his weapon, thinking he never expected this encounter to end in such a bad way. With that, the scene changes to the memories of a red-haired girl who was known to everyone as the Suing Gypsy. With this famous nickname, the young woman received several invitations to join well-known mercenary groups. But on the other hand, she was also bothered by bandits who heard rumors about her skills. In the midst of this hectic routine, a thought began to form in the fighter's mind as she fought. She came to believe that she had already surpassed the level of a simple mercenary with her very different sword. Smiling with confidence, the young woman felt she had become a truly powerful swordswoman. However, the moment to realize that all this was just arrogance on her part didn't take long to arrive. Under a heavy rain, a knight in heavy armor appears and asks if she is the famous gypsy. The Iron Giant mocks the nickname, saying it perfectly matches such a weak sword technique. With this, the redhead is shocked to realize that the enemy before her is much stronger than she thought. Finally, the brute humiliates her, saying she is nothing more than a low-level mercenary. With that, the brute says that if she weren't a woman, she would just be a bug that he would crush right there without a second thought. At this, he warns that the only reason she is alive today is because of the strict rules of his group of knights. But the Red Falcons do not take the lives of women or children, and so she should be grateful for their honor. In that moment, the redhead felt there was a giant wall separating the two of them as she held her broken weapon. With that, the girl realized this insurmountable barrier was what the world calls a true knight. Then the scene returns to the present, where the blonde young man remembers that the man's level is that of a sword wanderer. Swallowing hard, the young man realizes that the mercenary from the memories was much more powerful than he is now. Even so, she was defeated without being able to lift a finger, and now the deadly enemy approaches him relentlessly. In that instant, the protagonist feels a deadly aura coming from the adversary, which is much worse than when he was on the cliff. With fear taking over, his mana heart begins to beat much faster and stronger. This beat becomes increasingly powerful and causes a strange energy to course through the boy's entire body. Suddenly, his eyes glow with an intense blue color, and he realizes he can finally see something incredible. He sees the realm of superhumans, which can only be reached by those who have achieved the pinnacle of mastery with the blade. The blonde boy observes the mana flowing from his rival's body as if they were blood vessels that enhance attack and defense. But the little one also feels the weight of this crushing pressure that seems to pierce his soul in the midst of combat. Then the young man identifies this trail of energy as the famous path walked by the great master swordsman. The mysterious warrior asks why the young man was watching him and mentions the rumors about attacks on visitors. With a serious look, the man demands an immediate answer, or he will have to consider the protagonist a dangerous enemy. At this, the boy explains that he was just trying to find out if the stranger was a guest or a malicious intruder. He says that 1 year ago, while he was away, His village was destroyed and all his neighbors mysteriously disappeared. The protagonist reveals that barbarians and invaders always attack the place and constantly threaten his life. But he explains that he dealt with them all by himself and thinks he doesn't need to tell the stranger the whole truth. Even realizing the warrior is very powerful, the young man admits he would be done for if he got close without being careful. So, the young man confesses he was observing to judge whether the man was an intruder or just a guest. If he were a friendly visitor, the little one planned to invite him to be a new neighbor in the territory. But if he were an enemy, the blonde boy would have to come up with other plans to protect his lands and survive. With this, the wanderer asks if the boy intended to fight, even knowing the huge difference in strength between them. The young man replies with determination that this place holds all the precious memories of his entire life. He states that the lands are too precious to be abandoned, and that he would never flee from there out of fear. At that moment, the swordsman looks to the horizon and agrees that it is indeed a very special place. In a calm tone, the man says he understands how much the young master has been through difficult and painful times. Then the intruder decides it's time to show his position, since neighbors need to know each other's intentions. At this, the warrior asks the little one to lower his guard and put away his weapon so they can talk in peace. He promises that he will also sheathe his own blade and tell his true story to the protagonist. The blonde boy remains silent for a moment while the man waits for a positive response from his opponent. In that moment, we see the master teaching that to forge a heart of steel, one must reach the brink of defeat. The old man asks if his descendant is motivated, but the young man apologizes and says he can't do what he asks. Firmly, the young man explains that he still doesn't fully trust the stranger and needs the weapon for his defense. But the swordsman warns that if he really wanted to harm the boy, that training needle would be useless. Finally, the knight explains that putting his weapon away first would be a stain on his honor, and he needs to maintain his pride. The sun sets as the young man faces the intruder, and the mood between them grows increasingly heavy and tense. In that moment, the warrior observes the little one up close and thinks he seems too delicate for a real fight. With this, the stranger notices that despite his fragile appearance, the blonde boy's body shows signs of very hard training. But the intruder realizes that even with a lean frame, the boy's balance is simply perfect for fighting. Analyzing his posture, the man concludes that his opponent doesn't know classic swordsmanship and still fights like a beginner. Then the man realizes the blonde boy is just striking poses and poses not the slightest danger to someone of his high level. But the protagonist seems to know his limitations, and yet remains firm in his current battle stance. In that instant, the wanderer wonders what's wrong with the mysterious gaze of that little blonde warrior. With that, the young man's eyes begin to glow with an intense blue light that seems to read the enemy's every move. Then the mood changes, and the master swordsman decides he can no longer take this fight so lightly. In that moment, the tip of his blade begins to emanate a powerful energy as he prepares for the final attack. With this, the warrior assumes a serious stance as he feels a simple response won't be enough against this boy. Then a line of mana connects the two fighters, showing that their fate is sealed in that deadly duel. Without hesitation, the man advances with speed to end the confrontation and test his opponent's skills. Thinking quickly, the wanderer plans to strike the adversary's wrist to disarm him without causing any serious harm to his body. In this moment, he seeks the best way to win the duel while protecting the little blonde boy's life out of pure honor. However, the gleam in the protagonist's eyes becomes even stronger and more frightening in the face of the imminent danger. Then the sound of clashing metal echoes across the field, and sparks fly everywhere during the strong impact. With that, the intruder's expression changes to pure shock as he feels something went very wrong with his strike. Finally, the swordsman wonders how his own weapon was repelled by a boy who isn't even a master yet. But that wasn't all the blonde boy had saved for the end of the fight. With just a deep breath, the young man releases a blue mana smoke from his mouth. In that moment, the surrounding energy begins to stir like the waves of a raging sea. Surprised, the intruder wonders if that absurd heart formed in a second. Even thinking it's impossible, the warrior admits the boy really managed to repel the attack. He reflects that a normal core is usually flexible, but this young man's is completely different. The little one's power source is incredibly solid and rigid, as if it were an ice crystal. With a sharp gaze, the protagonist shows that his determination is as hard as the purest steel. Amidst the sunset, one thing becomes clear to the master watching his new adversary. The blonde boy's next strike will come with his entire soul, as he is betting his own life. Gritting his teeth, the small fighter prepares to make his riskiest move. On the other hand, the young man knows that blocking that giant blade wasn't the result of his technique. Sweating profusely, the young man admits to himself that the block was nothing but pure luck. He realized the knight didn't want to hurt him, and so used only the minimum amount of force. With his sharpened senses, the blonde boy predicted the sword's path and struck exactly at the opening. That's how the boy managed to perform the miracle of stopping such a powerful blow. But the price for this feat was high, and the impact felt like a carriage hitting him head on. A terrible pain runs through every bone in his body, as if they had all just been broken. Faced with that overwhelming presence, the young man feels the power difference is like that of a wolf. Even though he's completely wiped out, the protagonist cracks a smirk and doesn't give up. He finally got what he so desperately wanted and awakened the man a heart he nicknamed the Heart of Steel. Even so, the young man understands that he's still a beginner and that his normal strikes will never be able to touch his opponent. At this, the blonde boy realizes he needs to create his own battle path using the power of his new core and the needle. Then the scene shows Mary's past, which serves as a stepping stone for him to understand how to overcome his limits. On that day, the redhead crumbled before the overwhelming strength of a wanderer who seemed like an impossible wall to cross. With that, the fighter's body trembled with fear as she faced an obstacle that seemed like the end of her journey. But in that tense moment, the first thing that came to her mind was the distinctive voice of her former mentor. This gentleman was Heckle, and he was very weak in bed, giving his last pieces of advice to the young woman. The old man told her not to forget that many swordsmen give up when they encounter a wall that's hard to climb. But the master explained that this is just an excuse for the weak, and that barriers exist only to be overcome. He continued, saying that dread is a part of a warrior's life and should only serve to reach new heights. Then the mentor asked her to never look away from danger and to stand firm with all her determination. With this thought, the girl got up from the ground, ready to challenge fate and fight with everything she had left. She decided to face head on that knight in white armor who shone with a very sinister red energy. In that moment, the mercenary positioned herself for the duel against the metal giant who showed no mercy. With a firm and heavy step, the adversary advanced to crush the small warrior's resistance once and for all. But the opponent's attack was too violent, cutting the young woman several times as she tried to resist. Even while being hit, she kept her gaze fixed on the enemy as blood scattered all over the battlefield. At this, the young woman ends up receiving a cut, but the lesson was that if she didn't stop striking and kept trying, eventually the wall would finally break. The redhead's master says that her sword will surely be able to do something. He guarantees that one day, she will be strong enough to overcome that great barrier. With that, the protagonist's thoughts return to the harsh reality of the fight. And with this lesson in mind, the blonde boy understands that he just needs to believe in himself. Watching everything, the sword wanderer reflects on the life of a true warrior. He thinks that those who live by the sword eventually face a challenge. This challenge is like a giant wall that appears to block the fighter's path. With it comes a crushing pressure along with a feeling of total hopelessness. This energy is so strong that it makes every step feel like an impossible burden to carry. Then the only desire that arises is to turn your back and simply run from the danger. However, the warrior notices that this boy is acting in a completely different way. Instead of running, the young man faces the barrier, and it suddenly begins to show cracks. The cracks grow larger and larger, and several pieces of the wall begin to crumble. In that moment, the protagonist shows that his intention is to collide head-on with the obstacle. He knows this is reckless but sees it as an ordeal he desperately needs to overcome. The blonde boy thinks that his path doesn't need to be perfect or even complete to succeed. For him, it's enough that there's a small chance of reaching his goal, and that's sufficient. Then the boy's eyes shine, and he uses his true talent, which is doubt. He observes the knight's every muscle, his breathing, and the path his sword might take. The young man gathers all the clues, eliminates what is unnecessary, and creates his own path. The young man concentrates his mana on a single point to create a special technique. At this, his needle begins to glow with the energy of his steel heart. He focuses on a single path to finally reach his powerful adversary. Then he creates a single sword path to use in the battle. His master watches him with pride and tells him to advance without ever giving in. The old man explains that this is what it truly means to be a caravan. With that, the young man's energy molds around the needle, turning into a sword. The tutor advises him not to be afraid to collide and break himself in the challenge. Driven by this, the boy charges forward with force, causing a great impact on the ground. He needs to forge himself in the midst of the ordeal and show his strength to the whole world. In that moment, the blonde boy understands that what he feared most was not the fire. The scene returns to the redhead, who runs forward, admitting that she was very scared. She feared being the only survivor, and that the tragedy was just the beginning of everything. With the same feeling, the protagonist charges forward with everything, showing his determination. He remembers the days when he didn't even look in the mirror, and when breathing was a burden, and that's how he realized his greatest fear wasn't the fire of that tragedy, but rather his own weakness of always running from his problems and challenges. That's why the young man decides he will advance and pierce his enemy with everything he has. He wants to protect the memories of his daily life that was destroyed by the flames, and also the memories of his family that he lost in that terrible fire. He also fights for the future that was cruelly stolen from his hands, a future that was completely consumed by a world full of flames and despair. So if anyone asks if he managed to cross, he only has one answer. The young man is no longer afraid of the fire, nor of the world that currently surrounds him, even if he passes out or fails to win the battle to come. The blonde boy knows he can at least face his destiny head-on and without fear. With that, the two warriors charge towards each other at high speed. The protagonist attacks with all his strength and determination accumulated in the blow. At this, the sword wanderer smiles, preparing to block the boy's strike. The impact of the two weapons generates a massive shockwave that kicks up dust. However, the knight's blade is too strong and easily deflects the young man's attack. The little warrior's needle flies through the air, showing that the blow has failed. In that moment, the scene changes to Mary, who wonders if her master Hikal is at peace. She remembers that she followed his advice and left the orphanage to see the world. With the teachings and the needle he gave her, the girl set off on her journey. The young woman became free like him and longed for a life of long travels. But the redhead isn't sure if she can say she truly lived that life. The world was full of strong monsters and walls that willpower couldn't overcome. Even so, she turns to Hiko and says she can state one thing for sure. Until the last moment of her life, there wasn't a single wall in her path. She says she never turned her back on a challenge in her entire life. According to Surgeon's doctrine, they will meet again in the flames, and she will tell him her story. With tears in her eyes, the girl says her story would probably start that way. The scene then returns to the protagonist, who was thrown far away by the knight's blow. The red-haired girl falls into her master's arms and realizes she is no longer afraid of the fire. With that, a tear runs down the young woman's face as she hugs her mentor. And with the end of this memory, the scene returns to the present with some embers in the air. The protagonist then slowly opens his eyes after being knocked out in the fight. He wakes up a bit confused and wonders what happened after the enemy's strike. Next to a campfire, the young man questions if he ended up losing consciousness. Sitting up, the young man realizes he is covered with the cloak of that mysterious knight. Looking at his needle, he understands that in the end, he couldn't overcome his opponent. Holding his weapon, the blonde boy is disappointed with the outcome of that combat, but his master appears and tells his young descendant not to be discouraged by it. The old man states that it was a fight worthy of a true member of the caravans. With a smile, the tutor asks if he didn't notice something else besides his defeat. He reveals that the boy has finally managed to fully digest the needle. At this, the young man feels that his muscles have become much more flexible than before. Furthermore, his senses have sharpened like those of a wild and dangerous beast. He feels like a veteran mercenary who has lived his whole life on the battlefield. With this, the young man understands the master's intention in giving him that weapon. It wasn't just for the strength or the battle technique of the former owner. The tutor wanted him to see that girl's life in its entirety, her will to never give up, even when facing gigantic trials. It was for him to learn about that indomitable spirit she possessed. The young man then asked if it wouldn't have hurt to have told him all this from the beginning. In that moment, a tall figure approaches the campfire where they are. The knight says that it seems the young master has finally regained consciousness. He explains he was just getting water, but the boy jumps back into a fighting stance. The man then shows a canteen with a friendly smile to calm the situation, but the protagonist remains suspicious and says there are still misunderstandings between them. His master tells him not to worry, as that man will not harm him. Even so, the young man continues to sweat and thinks that suspicion is inevitable. The warrior understands and says it must not be easy to let his guard down after everything. Then he asks if the young man would calm down if he told his story first. The knight says he will explain the reason he came to this place, and also the reason he is not a threat, but the boy is startled by his actions. The man then asks for permission to formally introduce himself to the young master. He takes off his shirt and says his name is Patel, a retired knight and wanderer. Then Patel reveals that he is also a terminal patient on the brink of passing on. He says that even the priests confirmed he has at most 1 month to live. At this, Patel says he is just a sick man waiting for his own end to arrive. Then the warrior asks if the young master can please listen to his story. After the confusion settled down, the two finally had a serious conversation. Unfortunately, unlike his swordsmanship, Mr. Patel was not very good with words. Communication between them was certainly not the easiest at first, but for the protagonist, that awkwardness seemed like unadorned sincerity. In short, Patel left his order of knights to find a place to pass away. The wanderer explains that he didn't want to be a burden to anyone in his final moments. He only wished to spend his final time in silence and on his own terms. The boy is quiet for a moment, just processing the man's whole story. His master then appears and says there seems to be no lie in his words. The tutor explains that the knight's mana heart is being consumed by the disease. This illness is advancing slowly and is about to consume his core of power. And the moment the disease finally reaches the warrior's mana heart, the life of that sword wanderer will simply come to its definitive end. With that, Patel extends his hand and asks what the young master thinks of all this. The protagonist looks at the man's hand and remains silent for a moment. Then the blonde boy stands up and asks if this is enough to be his neighbor. He shakes the warrior's hand and finally introduces himself as Arhan. With that, the young man welcomes Mr. Patel and accepts him as his new neighbor. Meanwhile, the boy's master observes the whole scene from afar with a serious expression. The old man seems to be thinking about something important regarding his disciple's future. After the handshake, Arhan turns away, and the knight thanks him for his hospitality. With a glow in his chest, the wanderer thanks the young master for accepting him there. In that moment, the blonde boy's tutor decides that the time has finally come to take the next step. He thinks that there is no better place than a battlefield for training. Then a few days pass, and we see a landscape with a dirt road. A cart travels down this road, carrying the protagonist and his two companions. The young man says he thought he would have swordsmanship lessons, now that he had awakened his powers, but his master surprised him by saying they needed to go to a distant place. Thanks to Patel, He no longer worried about intruders and didn't understand the trip. The tutor scolds him, saying he still hasn't shed the mentality of an ordinary person. He explains that the caravans are different from everyone in the world and very special. For those with blood of steel, the endless fight is more important than normal training. Furthermore, digesting new swords is the priority for the young man's growth. And according to the old man, their current destination is the perfect place for that sort of thing. It is a place where those who only wish to fight, regardless of anything else, gather. A stage for duels of life or demise that, in his time, had a specific name. A place known to all as the legendary and dangerous gladiator arena. The image shows two swords clashing violently in a deadly combat. We see the crowd shouting and cheering with great excitement for the fight. At this, we see from a distance two warriors facing off in the center of a crowded arena. The old man then reveals to the young man that this place is the famous and feared arena. The story begins in the steel city of Firma, a place with a ton of houses built. This place represents the Iron Kingdom, where metalworking is super advanced, you know. It's no exaggeration to say that all the weapons in the entire kingdom are produced in this place. But what really made the city of Firma grow and get rich was something else entirely, and that place is the arena, which is huge and catches the eye of everyone who passes by. At that, a bearded old man comments that the name of the place changed, but it doesn't look bad at all. In that exact moment, he feels the heat coming from it and says that part hasn't changed a bit. Then, the older guy remembers that all kinds of brawls and battles went down right in that place, like some beast fights to see which was the strongest and duels of people against monsters. There were even some clashes between races to decide which people were the most dominant in the region. Even though they were all pretty wild, the worst of all were the one-on-one fighting duels. In these fights, warriors with various skills would roll around in the dirt like wild animals. The guys who won would take out the ones who lost and take everything they had. The whole crowd, hyped up by the scent of battle, would throw coins and bet with great enthusiasm. It was a wild city built on the aftermath of countless spilled battles. The blonde boy thinks that if this is true, there's no better place for him to get strong. He imagines that besides gaining XP, he can devour his opponent's weapons. The spirit then calls his relative a fool for thinking something like that now, because if it were that easy, he would have already made the boy eat all the weapons in the junkyard. He would even eat the relics that were left behind by those invading guys. And with a very serious face, the old man says that swallowing weapons without thinking isn't going to happen, because over time, the kid would be overwhelmed by the mixed up memories of the swords. The most important thing is for him to control the sword and not the other way around, so he listens. With everything explained, he tells them to head to the super intense fighting arena. A little while later, we see a bunch of people walking toward that same place. One of the guards is very surprised to find out it's Lord Arhan's first time there. A lady at the reception then tells him to go to the fighter registration first. You know, out of nowhere, the kid is surrounded by some fighters who say he can't compete there. Our protagonist then wants to know what they mean by this so-called medal. When he hears this, the spirit with him is totally in shock over the situation. With his eyes wide open, he wonders what the heck that thing was. The ghost then yells that this thing didn't exist in his time, leaving the young man confused. The receptionist gives a smile and asks the boy to get his medal and return to the line. The medal shows the guy's fame and status, and it has a rank system by colors and such. The classifications are black, white, platinum, gold, and also silver. Of course, the medal he ends up receiving is the lowest level one, which is bronze. Holding the item, he comments with a forced little smile that things have changed a lot. The boy pokes fun at the spirit, who shouts that it wasn't supposed to be this way. The ghost says that in the old days, everyone was just thrown into the arena at once to fight. He gets really worked up about the weight classes, but the blonde guy figures out it's all about the money. The young man explains that if it were only life or death fights, there wouldn't be any fighters left. He continues, saying that the good guys should fight each other, just like the newer ones. Looking at the crowd in line, he comes to the conclusion that the times have simply changed. Because of this, the arena became a tourist spot that attracts people from far away, and that's how Firma got rich and became the giant city it is today. Also nowadays, when someone wins a fight, they rarely finish off the loser. The ghost gets super mad about this and asks if this is some kind of play, but he gives up on complaining, says this might be good for the boy in the end, because fighting an enemy of a similar level also teaches its own lessons. In the meantime, the old man suggests checking out the blacksmiths around there, because the boy's sword breaks very easily, and it would be good to have some spares. Out of the blue, the spirit stops floating and stays silent for a little while without saying anything. Then he asks his relative what that is, leaving the boy a bit confused. The boy turns to him and asks what he's talking about, not understanding the situation. Right after, the blonde's eyes fly open in surprise at what he was seeing. He sees a giant wall with a bunch of cool swords displayed in showcases. Getting closer to look, he can't understand what's going on in that place. Then the young man wonders why all those weapons are there in the middle of the street. With his mouth open in shock, he looks at a man who is coming toward him. The gentleman laughs and says it seems the young master is seeing the Hall of Honor for the first time. Our protagonist then asks what that place with so many cool weapons on display is. The gentleman introduces himself, saying his name is Tom, the caretaker, and offers to explain. A bit awkwardly, the young hare doesn't quite know what to say to him at that moment. At that instant, the spirit of his ancestor looks at everything with a thoughtful expression. Then Arhan introduces himself and says he would be very happy to hear his explanation. With that, the caretaker says that the weapons there belong to great fighters of the past. Even though they are old and worn, they are displayed to honor the fighting spirit. Next, the scene shows more of that giant wall that was full of cool swords. The blonde seems to have understood, and Tom asks if he has any other questions. The old man says with a smile that taking care of that whole place is his little pride. At this moment, the ghost whispers to his relative to ask the caretaker a question. With a sly smile, he tells the young man to ask how he can get the swords. The spirit then questions if he understood what all of that really meant. Then the old man says that he had finally found what he had been looking for a long time. That was the next sword the boy should devour to become much stronger. Soon after, the scene changes, showing us the giant arena in the city. Then, we see our protagonist entering through the fighter's corridor, and with a focused and very determined look, he begins to prepare for his first fight. Back to the conversation, Tom confirms that there is a way to get those weapons. He explains that fighters prove their worth and earn the right to have one of them. In other words, every time his metal levels up, he can get a new sword. The caretaker then points to the weapon the young man was looking at earlier with great attention. He advises that it can be taken as soon as the boy manages to reach the silver level. Hearing this, the spirit comments that this haul is a real treasure in itself, because to others they are old weapons, but to the blonde, they are worth much more than gold. Giving a smile, he says that now the boy needs to rank up to get all of them. The young man thinks about stealing everything, but the spirit warns that the caretaker is no ordinary guy. Our hero is confused, as he seemed like a super nice and calm old man. The ancestor explains that the caretaker is actually on another, very high level of power. He is an expert who turns mana into armor to have an absurd defense. Aran is shocked and wonders why a superhuman would want to be a caretaker. The spirit says it's no surprise, since most who reach that level are crazy. Then the old man jokes that stealing from the hall will have to wait a little longer. Although a lot has changed, he figures out that some traditions still remain, like covering one's face to fight just as a warrior, without status or any kind of fame. Protagonist thinks that this isn't bad for him at all, not in the slightest. This way, he can fight without a second thought, against any enemy that comes at him. Out of nowhere, a man in a hood asks what our young warrior's fighting nickname is. Arhan is a bit surprised, but the man says that nobody uses their real name in the arena. So he asks the boy to say the name of greatest pride that will walk alongside him. The boy remembers when he was a child, looking at a sword with his father. They would look at a giant painting of a strong man who seemed to be from the family. Back in the present, he prepares to say what his new fighter name will be. The hooded man waits curiously, wondering where that different name came from. But he says it doesn't matter and wishes that victory may follow his first step in the arena. The young fighter then walks toward the bright light coming from the battle arena. He puts on a mask and introduces himself to everyone using the name Liam in the arena. The camera then pans out and shows the giant circular arena, which is completely empty. A guy in the audience shouts that the bronze level is the weakest there is in that place, and these fights only serve to entertain the crowd between the main duels. Our masked hero notices that there are no cheers or applause for him. On the contrary, he can only hear a lot of heckling and criticism coming from the crowd. A man shouts angrily that he didn't travel all the way there to see something so pathetic. Another guy curses at the fighters and tells them to just meet their end already. The spirit comments that for the weak, only humiliation and contempt remain. He asks if the boy is scared, but the young man says of course he's not. The ghost then tells his young relative to raise his name on the battlefield, for he carries the history and also the honor of his entire caravan family lineage. With a shining gaze, the masked youth agrees with his ancestor at that moment. That's why he says with all the certainty in the world that he will win the upcoming fight. An announcer then appears and introduces the third match of the day with rookie fighters. He points to the young man, saying he has no name, face, or history in the arena. In a mocking tone, he announces the debut of the baby rookie in the arena, the great Liam, and then he introduces the opponent who has destroyed everyone since he debuted there. He is a rookie who already has a winning streak of 3 consecutive victories in the arena. His name is the giant fighter Tumor, who smiles in a very creepy way at the guy. The announcer dedicates the sacred match to the goddess Lepery, and the fighters face off. The giant makes fun of the boy's name, saying he chose a very pathetic name. He continues, saying the sound is weak and useless, and that it would be a waste to use his sword. Approaching the boy, the big guy decides to make a very strange proposal to him. He tells the young man to take off his ridiculous mask and sword to dance a little. If the boy does that, he promises he will show mercy and spare the boy's life. The blonde reminds him of the rule about not being able to take each other's lives inside the arena. The giant shouts that he doesn't care about rules, and that where he comes from, the defeated don't get to walk away. That's why he finished off the 3 he fought before using just his own hands. He boasts about taking them all down, decisively ending their fights without mercy. Tumor explains that he did this because they ask why he would go so far in a fight. And with a crazy smile, he says it's the winner's privilege in the final show, but he finds the boy so useless that he wouldn't feel any joy in finishing him off. So the brute asks the young man to at least move and entertain the whole crowd. And that would be the price for our masked hero to be able to continue living a bit longer. The announcer gets excited, saying the tension is high and that the fight will be good. With a smile, he tells the 2 fighters to take their positions inside the arena. Without further delay, the announcer starts the match and the 2 get ready to fight. At this moment, the masked youth says that he also has a proposal to make now. He points his sword at the giant and demands that he take back the insult to his name. If he does that, the boy promises that he will let him have a peaceful and quiet end. The giant is a bit confused for a second by the boy's sheer courage. Soon after, he starts to chuckle at the threat he just heard. Then he explodes into laughter, saying he's dying of fear of the boy. In the audience, everyone makes fun of the young fighter, calling him a tough little kid. Someone asks if he got that name from a book, or if it was from his late father. The giant says that if he heats things up like this, it's hard to go easy on him. Then he gives the boy one last chance to behave and give up on that fight. With a very sadistic smile, the big guy prepares to attack the boy with everything he's got. He swings his giant sword, but the young blonde easily dodges the blow. The boy then demands that his opponent apologize for insulting his name. With a cold look, he repeats his condition for the giant to have a more peaceful end. The big guy is completely shocked and speechless at the whole situation. Filled with rage, he calls the young man a miserable punk and charges at him with hatred. Liam then blocks the heavy blow with his thin sword, generating a giant explosion. Even with the very strong impact, the young man manages to stand firm in the same spot. The giant looks at his hand with a pained expression, not believing what happened. He realizes his hand is bleeding because of the full force of that impact. With his mouth open, he screams in pain and anger over the injury he suffered. The people in the audience are shocked and can't believe what they're seeing. The giant fighter grinds his teeth in pain, not understanding what had happened. The crowd that was mocking him before now shouts, in surprise and admiration, at the fight. Toomer, still in shock, wonders how all of that was possible. He remembers that the boy was trembling and looked like a complete amateur before the fight started, and he can't understand how that rookie managed to do something like that. Suddenly, he realizes something, and his eyes go wide with so much surprise. Then he wonders if the boy acted that clumsy on purpose. With his eyes shining, Liam asks if he's going to call him a coward because of that. The boy reminds the giant that, as he himself said, this isn't child's play. Full of anger, the big fighter grinds his teeth with great force at that moment. Holding his injured hand, he calls the young man a very sneaky and clever little punk, completely blind with rage. He shouts that he's going to finish the boy right then and there. With a very quick movement, our hero dodges his opponent's furious attack. The giant shouts in frustration as he completely misses his blow and hits nothing. The giant figures out that the masked youth is dodging all of his attacks, and he notices that each dodge is by a hair, escaping his attack by a whisker. The big guy is shocked by the perfection of his opponent's movements in battle. Sweating coldly, he wonders what kind of monster that little fighter is. The man feels as if he's fighting a giant snake and not a person. He tries one more blow with his huge sword, but ends up missing the attack again. Our protagonist dodges with mastery and prepares for his counter-attack. He advances with his weapon in a very fast and accurate movement toward the enemy. The blow ends up hitting the giant's chest, who can't defend himself in time. Toomer feels the pain of the cut and lets out a scream of agony inside that arena. The big guy tries one last desperate attack, but the young man easily dodges it. Leaping backward, Liam distances himself from his opponent, who is down on the ground. His eyes shine with a very intense blue light as he faces the giant. On his knees, the brute breathes with difficulty and is completely defeated. In a final move, the boy manages to disarm his opponent with a precise strike. The huge fighter is thrown backward by the force of the impact and ends up falling to the ground. Liam then slowly approaches his enemy, who is already completely powerless. He stands in front of the fallen man and says he's going to make the proposal again. With a very serious tone, he tells the giant to take that ridiculous helmet off his head. With a cold look, the boy then tells the giant to dance a little for him. The ancestor's spirit watches as the narrator and the audience are left in shock. Fallen and injured, Toomer looks at the victorious youth, unable to believe it. Breathing heavily, he stammers and says he can understand the situation. Then he accepts the proposal and asks for a moment to recover a little. The giant says he can't breathe properly because of his injuries. He tries to get up, supporting his hand on his sword that was on the ground. In the blink of an eye, the young fighter pierces his opponent's hand in the arena. Next, he also mobilizes the giant's leg with another very quick strike. Toomer grinds his teeth in pain and surprise at the boy's unexpected action. Our hero then advises him to think carefully about his next move. As the giant seems terrified upon hearing there will be no more proposals, the big guy then kneels before the young man, completely surrendered and afraid. With a trembling voice, he apologizes for insulting his name and begs for his life. In the audience, all the spectators are silent, shocked by the whole scene. Suddenly, the crowd that was previously mocking explodes into cheers of great euphoria now. A man shouts that this rookie is incredible and the best bronze he has ever seen. Another guy says he's going to bet everything on him and asks what the boy's name was. Everyone then shouts the name of the small victorious gladiator, the Great Lion. With his back to the arena, our protagonist hears the crowd shouting his name. From afar, the caretaker Tom smiles and says he felt he was an exceptional guy. He thinks he has made a connection with a fighter who will become very famous soon. But the old man also worries about all the attention he just received, because Tom knows that in that arena, this kind of attention can be very dangerous. And looking at two suspicious men in the audience, he concludes that it is a poison. The scene then changes, showing us a very blue and clear sky with some clouds. A few days later, we see the giant and imposing arena of the city again. Our protagonist is surprised to receive an unexpected visit. He asks what the lady said, and she repeats it with a smile for the fighter lion. She explains that the arena evaluated him very well after his last fight there. That's why they want to make a proposal for a promotion match to the silver level. The scene then cuts to a man with red eyes, glowing with so much fury. A gang surrounds him and calls him the leader of the Blood Cave, or something like that. Suddenly, the man vanishes in front of them, leaving everyone very confused. In the blink of an eye, one of the men is hit by a blow that takes him out. The others panic when they see their friend on the ground, no longer moving. A red aura envelopes the warrior's foot, showing the effect of the devil's blood. This ability increases his agility, making him extremely fast and lethal. The bandits are frightened because he moves faster than they can see. A blade flies through the air towards another member of that same gang, and so more men fall one after another before the fighter's speed. The gang leader watches his men fall one by one, unable to do anything. He doesn't understand how a barbarian received the divine blessing of the goddess named Elga. The man wonders where a monster like that warrior came from. With a dry mouth, he gulps upon seeing the massacre that was happening. Then he shouts for the archers to load their crossbows and bring them to him. One of the men hands him the weapon, which was already loaded and ready to fire. The leader thinks that even if the warrior is fast, he needs to stop at some point, and he notices that after each attack, the barbarian stops to look for the next target. At that moment, he sees the warrior with his back to him and finds his big chance. With his aim ready, he prepares to shoot at the exact moment he needs to. He fires the arrow with precision towards the distracted barbarian. The warrior stops amidst the bodies of his enemies with the arrow in his body. Even with the injury, he remains standing with a serious and very determined look. The leader smiles victoriously, thinking he has finally managed to hit his enemy. Back in the present, our protagonist listens to the proposal with great attention. He remembers that 2 days after his fight against Tumor, he had 3 more battles. Using his sword, he won all of them in a very fast and efficient way. Each victory was achieved rationally and without any hesitation on his part. The lady from the arena smiles and says that the proposal is based on his high evaluation. But something seems very strange to the young man, and his ghost ancestor agrees. The spirit observes everything with a suspicious and very mysterious look on his face. The lady explains that he just needs to fight a warrior they choose. With a smile, she says that the important thing is that he won't even have to fight much. If he can last for 3 minutes in the arena, his victory will be declared. She looks at him with a bright gaze and says that this is a very rare opportunity, because upon reaching the silver level, he will be able to fight against stronger opponents. In addition, he will receive much higher fight money for each of his victories. She then asks if Lord Liam understands that this is a great chance for him. With a sly smile, she questions if he has realized the opportunity there. The ancestor spirit then explains that this is a rookie crushing. It's a process to eliminate smart rookies who fight in an efficient way, and also a special event for the people who like to see rookies being humiliated. He reveals that it's an execution ceremony to lure rookies with the promotion. Then they are put against much stronger opponents to be destroyed. The ghost advises the boy to refuse the proposal so as not to be humiliated for nothing. He then asks what his young relative will decide to do in that situation. With a determined look, The boy replies that the answer is very obvious to him. He readily accepts the proposal, whoever the opponent he's going to face is. 2 days later, the arena announces his enemy in a sealed letter. Her nickname was the Black Bride, an undefeated powerhouse at the silver level. Academies are the best institutions for those born with a talent for the sword. In other words, his opponent was far superior to him in absolutely everything. The spirit warns that the Black Bride is quite famous for her skills. Besides being skilled, she renders all her opponents useless forever in a fight. With a smile, the ghost says that lasting 3 minutes will not be easy at all. He then tries to remember how they say it in these situations nowadays, and with a shout, he tells the boy that he's completely doomed in this fight. But the young man says that the Black Bride won't be stronger than his master, Patel, because even when sick, he was one of the strongest sword walkers that existed. Patel only used techniques appropriate to the boy's level in order to honor him, but the spirit warns that he can't expect the same mercy from the Black Bride. Sarcastically, the ghost thanks him for being awakened to the terrible reality. The boy thinks that his master never lies about the sword, so he believes it. But he also has his steel mana heart and the memories of the warrior Mali. With determination, he says he has enough to last the 3 minutes in the arena. And with a focused look, he sees a chance to win that difficult fight. A hooded woman appears and introduces herself as the little gladiator named Liam. She removes the hood, revealing herself to be the dreaded Black Bride in person before him. Our protagonist is surprised to see his opponent right there in front of him. With wide eyes, he realizes he couldn't feel her presence, with sweat dripping down his face. The young hare is completely surprised. He recognizes the long black hair and her Oriental-style sword. With his heart racing, he wonders if that really is the famous Black Bride. He decides not to admit his identity to her for any reason whatsoever. So he pretends not to know anything and says, "She must have the wrong person." The woman stares at him in silence for a moment with a very serious look on her face. She sighs and says that this is very boring as she holds her sword in her hand. In a swift move, she draws the weapon and attacks the boy by surprise with everything she has. He manages to dodge just barely and is shocked by the speed of her attack. The woman's blade passes inches from his face, almost hitting him squarely. The boy jumps back, still surprised by her attack. With an impatient tone, she tells him not to waste her time. She reveals that she recognized him by his quick reaction and his needle sword. With a piercing gaze, she states that he cannot deceive her eyes. The woman then says he doesn't need to be so suspicious, as she only came to make a proposal. With a cold and direct look, she tells the boy to abandon the match against her. She advises him not to make a foolish decision and to give up on that fight. Then she warns him not to let her ruin his promising future. The young man clenches his fist and asks what she would do if he decided to fight. He challenges her to say what she would do if he didn't give up the match. With her eyes glowing red, she says that then he will pay the price. At night, the caretaker Tom is in the Hall of Honor when he notices he has a visitor. He smiles and wonders who the welcome guest would be at this time of night. As he turns, he sees young Lord Arhan approaching him very slowly. The boy apologizes for visiting so late in Bose to the caretaker. He says he knows it's a bold request, but he needs a favor from him. With his eyes shining, he asks if he could receive a sword from that hall. He clenches his fist and asks what she would do if he decided to fight in the arena. He challenges her to say what she would do if he didn't give up that match. With her eyes glowing red, she says that then he will pay a high price. She states that she shows no mercy to an opponent who faces her with a sword. Then the woman advises him to choose wisely what his next step will be. He stands in the middle of the street, thinking about the threat he just received from her. The spirit says she has a talent too great for the era they live in. For her, the barrier of the sword walker is just a small step to climb. With more luck, she will soon fly to the next realm like a true prodigy. He describes her as a genuine prodigy with bright, white wings. The boy is surprised by the praise coming from his super strict master. He admits that for him, as he is now, the power difference is too great. It's like a fragile bridge over a giant abyss that can't be measured. But even so, something shines in his chest, a light of hope and determination. With a firm look, he declares that he will not give up on that fight no matter what. The spirit watches him with a serious look and reminds him that time will not wait. He tells the young man to hurry, as they need to act as quickly as possible. They need to find his second sword before the great battle that is approaching. Back in the Hall of Honor, he repeats his request to the caretaker named Tom. The old man is surprised and asks what the young lord means by that. Tom is silent for a moment, processing the unexpected request. He then asks if the request is related to his promotion fight. The boy confirms, and the caretaker says the news has already spread everywhere. Tom regrets that the arena played such a bad joke on a young talent. Therefore, he advises the boy to rethink his promotion match. He then tells the story of the Black Bride, a girl from the Eastern continent. She graduated at the top of her class, proving her exceptional talent. And in the arena, she has already surpassed several fighters, becoming a true prodigy. Tom recognizes that Arhan has qualities, but it's not yet his time to face her. He suggests that the boy gain more experience before trying to challenge her. The caretaker guarantees that if he does that, he can have a much brighter fight. The young man thanks him for the sincere advice, but says he still wishes to face her. He admits that his body trembles, just thinking about the overwhelming power she has. With a smile, he says that as a devotee of the goddess Lepri, he cannot avoid a fight out of fear, because that would be betraying his fighter's heart and his faith in the goddess of war. That's why, even shamelessly, he went to the hall to gather some courage, so that in tomorrow's duel, he can receive the spirit of those who fought with glory. He guarantees that if he survives and gets promoted, he can take a memento without any problems, but he won't throw a fit, and if the caretaker doesn't agree, he will understand. The young man admits it's just a selfish desire to gain a little courage. The caretaker observes him with a serious and thoughtful look for a long moment. He turns his back to the boy and remains silent for a few moments. Under the moonlight, he says that by the rules, this shouldn't be allowed. But as the guardian of the fighter's spirits, he cannot ignore his sincerity. With a smile, the old man extends his hand and says he will grant his request. The boy is surprised and worried, but Tom says he has influence in the arena. The caretaker gets emotional seeing such an incredible fighter after so long. With tears in his eyes, he says he gets more emotional with age, and the young man thanks him. The ancestor's spirit watches the scene with a proud and satisfied look. He jokes that his relative has more talent for acting than for using a sword, and if he had followed that career, he would have become a star a long time ago. With the condition met, the caretaker says there is now only one thing left to do. He needs to digest the power of the sword before the big fight that is to come. The next day, the arena is full and ready for the long-awaited battle. The announcer shouts the name of the fight: Little Gladiator versus the Great Black Bride. The Black Bride enters the arena with a veil mysteriously covering her face. With a cold and focused look, she prepares for the combat that is about to begin. Elsewhere, she prepares and asks who this little gladiator is. She questions if they want her to crush someone who is just a beginner with a sword. The lady from the arena confirms and says that the planners asked her to take one of his limbs, because according to them, that would make the show much more interesting for the public. The Black Bride asks if they think she would accept a proposal like that. The lady says she understands that the proposal doesn't please her at all, so if she accepts, they will offer something they keep in their own vault. The reward is the legendary dragon sword that came from the Eastern continent. The lady from the arena remembers that it is an item of great importance for the swordsman there. She then provokes her, saying that it's also one of the reasons why she fights. The Black Bride remains silent, thinking about the very tempting offer. The lady from the arena smiles and says she will take her silence as a yes, and with a smile, she says she expects a great match from her in the arena. The Black Bride thinks that this is a proposal she cannot refuse under any circumstances. And as a person, not as a fighter, this was the only mercy she could offer. Back in the arena, she walks toward her opponent with very firm steps. With her veil and her sword, she positions herself for the battle that is about to begin. She faces him and says that he came after all to face her inside that arena. Our masked protagonist walks towards her with his sword in hand. With a serious tone, she warns him that from now on, everything that happens there, with her eyes glowing red, she says that it will be at his own risk. Suddenly, an intense red aura starts to come out of the young fighter's body. The Black Bride is surprised and wonders what that powerful energy is. She smells a sickening scent of blood that fills the entire battle arena. She can't believe that this immense power is coming from the boy in front of her. With his face in shadow and his eyes glowing, he reveals his true identity. He is a resident of the free city of Crowd, a dark and very dangerous place. Someone who voluntarily stained himself with blood to gain his freedom. The scene then changes, showing us a beautiful sunset over the very pretty ocean. This place is Crowd, one of the 6 free cities that separated from the Republic. A place that was once famous for its beauty and known by everyone at the time. A place that was once called Paradise, but the history no longer matters now. Today, Crowd is a land where freedom and hope have completely vanished. The city has become a nightmare where oppression and despair rule everything. We see a man kneeling, begging for help from a very powerful noble. Another man coughs with difficulty, showing the misery that has taken over the place. The city has become a nightmare where oppression and despair rule everything. The root of this shadow began with the corruption of the nobles and their greed for power. Blinded by it, they sold the city's territory to the Golden Empire. And they even pawned the basic rights of the citizens in exchange for a lot of gold. This meant that they had fallen into slavery without rights or dignity. Faced with this reality, the young man always questioned what his destiny was. He saw fathers beaten to their end for begging rich tourists for food, and mothers who sold themselves so their children wouldn't go hungry in that place. He lost his sister to a fever because he had no money to buy medicine. Alone in the dark room, he watched over his little sister's lifeless body. He wondered why they had to be trapped in such a cruel present, and he found the answer in a place he never expected: the guillotine. At a public execution, a crowd gathered to watch the sad event. A man with his head in the guillotine was waiting for his tragic end. His crime was assaulting a drunk tourist who was tormenting him for no reason. Tired of being beaten, he finally decided to resist and fight back against the guy. Bloody scenes were not rare, but a foreigner as a victim was unprecedented there. To calm the anger of the great powers, the city decided to make an example, and so the man was publicly executed to serve as a lesson for everyone there. It was an act of unilateral and unjust violence, but he felt no pity. He feared the violence that would come from the foreigners and the screams that would follow. But the next day, there were no screams or violence in the streets of Crowd. A strange calm settled over the city in the days that followed, a peace so quiet that it seemed unfamiliar and frightening to all of them. The reason for that sudden calm was very simple and also very clear to the foreigners. That incident turned the citizens into dangerous beings. A tear runs down a man's face as he realizes the terrible truth. With their sharp fangs on display, the citizens were now feared by all. They had become dangerous beings who hid very sharp fangs, and with that, they realized they could change and break the chains that bound them. Then he understood that they were all accomplices in that horrible situation. They were accomplices to all the violence and despair that took over the city. Their only crime was not having resisted sooner and accepting the oppression in silence. A noble toasts with a satisfied smile at the misfortune of all his people. Freedom has a price, and someone needs to spill blood to get it. Standing on a rooftop, he decided to become that someone of his own free will, for the freedom that belonged to all the oppressed citizens of that city, and for the atonement that all should have borne together as one united people. Under the moonlight, he prepares for his mission with a dagger in his hand. He acts for the good of the paradise that Crowd once was for all of them there. With his weapon in hand, he is ready to fight for everyone's freedom. Back in the arena, the announcer dedicates the sacred duel to the goddess Lepri, and with a shout, He announces the start of the match between the two great fighters. The Black Bride observes her opponent with an analytical and very surprised look. She thinks that before he looked like a mercenary, but now he is different. Now he looks like an assassin who has been stained with blood many, many times. His aura is sinister, and he seems like an assassin ready to strike at any moment. She remains silent for a moment, trying to understand the change in her opponent. She doesn't understand what she's seeing, but she knows that something has drastically changed in him. The woman advances with speed toward the young fighter inside the arena, but she realizes that even with his sinister aura, it changes absolutely nothing. The boy prepares for the attack with a blue energy coming from his body. He moves with incredible speed, dodging his opponent's blow. The Black Bride attacks with her sword, but the young man dodges with great perfection. She is shocked to see that he dodged her sword with great ease. She doesn't understand how he managed to react so quickly to her surprise attack. The boy leaps over her with his daggers, ready for his counter-attack. She realizes that he has become a completely different being than he was before. His eyes shine with a new light of power and determination in that arena. With a firm hand on her sword, she prepares for what is to come in the fight. The woman advances with speed toward the young fighter inside the arena. She realizes that even with his sinister aura, it changes absolutely nothing. The boy prepares for the attack with a blue energy coming from his body. He moves with incredible speed, dodging his opponent's blow. The Black Bride smiles and says that even his breathing and movements are those of another person. With sword in hand, he prepares for an intense and challenging confrontation. The woman questions him about his true identity as they face each other. With a firm hand on his sword, the boy concentrates for the next move. The Black Bride attacks with a quick and precise blow towards our hero. The young man dodges with agility, and the two exchange super fast blows. The woman continues her relentless attacks inside the battle arena. She feels as if she's fighting against an assassin and a mercenary at the same time. Her opponent's stance constantly changes, making it difficult for her to read the fight. This makes his movements unpredictable and adds an extreme level of difficulty. She realizes that he surpassed the level of a mere beginner a long time ago. With a gleam in her eyes, she prepares to use all her power in the fight. The masked boy feels the change in his opponent's energy in the arena. With a quick movement, she advances with a new intensity and a new power. In the end, she concludes that all of it is just recklessness on his part. His eyes widen in surprise as he feels the true power of the Black Bride. The boy moves with agility, dodging his opponent's powerful attacks. With a serious look, she says she hopes he still has a few cards up his sleeve. He holds his sword firmly, ready to face the challenge that is to come. The entire arena seems to tremble with the intensity of the ongoing battle. In the audience, a man shouts that it's crazy for a bronze to pressure the Black Bride so much. Another spectator says she is the undefeated gladiator and won't be easily defeated. Crouching, the boy hears the crowd's cheers, encouraging him not to give up. He feels a murderous intent so cold it could freeze his soul. A heavy scent of blood seems to fill the entire place around him. He wonders if this is the world that his master Fang used to always see. Spirit explains that the mercenary swordswoman and the assassin are different, but the swords they loved share one thing in common between them. They were forged to fight against the strongest, becoming swords of suffocation. The ghost says that for him, who has only taken his first steps, it might be heavy, but he advises him not to let himself be consumed by this immense power. He needs to understand and accept the assassin's life to make it his own. Breathing heavily, the young man concentrates to control all this power. The spirit says he has calmed down, but the real challenge begins now. The woman has already understood his capabilities in that brief exchange of blows, and now she will hunt him with everything she has, without showing any kind of mercy. With his daggers in hand, the boy prepares for the hunt that is to come. He realizes there is nowhere to hide in an open arena like that one. Besides, he can no longer expect her to lower her guard again in the fight. His best option is to keep his distance and buy time to survive. The 3-minute limit is a card in his hand, and he needs to use it very well. He runs across the arena, trying to keep his distance from his relentless opponent. But the woman calls him useless and advances with impressive speed. The boy is shocked at how quickly she approaches him in the arena. In the blink of an eye, she closes the distance between them, ready to attack. The crowd in the arena watches the scene with astonishment and apprehension because of the fight. From a distance, Tom realizes that the young man doesn't understand the power of a sword walker. They project a path to suppress their opponents, creating a territory, and they expand that path to draw tremendous power from within, becoming true superhumans capable of incredible feats in battle. The Black Bride attacks with a series of fast and powerful blows in the arena. The boy tries to defend himself, but is surprised by her strength and speed. The two exchange blows in a deadly dance of swords and also daggers. He realizes that her power and speed are on a different level. Common swordsmanship leaves inevitable openings between attack blows, and there should be an unavoidable gap when resetting the combat stance. But the Black Bride's sword doesn't have this opening, and her blows are continuous. It's almost as if she were painting a world on a canvas with her blade. Her movements are like the brushstrokes of a master painter creating a work of art. With her eyes shining, she advances with impressive grace and precision. The woman attacks with a series of fast and powerful blows in the fighting arena. The boy manages to defend himself, but the force of the attacks leaves him quite stunned. The spirit explains that the Eastern sword is a style of martial arts. Its mysterious movements incorporate nature with lightness and a lot of fluidity. The elegant arc traced by her blade is like a deadly dance in the arena. Everything flows together, drawing beautiful curves that fall like a wave over him. Each movement is connected to the next in a perfect and continuous sequence. And the moment her movements stop, a new opportunity arises for him. With focused eyes, he notices the small opening in his opponent's attack. He prepares to seize the only chance he will have to counterattack. This is his last chance to put an end to this intense battle. With a shout, he advances and manages to hit his opponent squarely with the blow. Back in his hometown, he remembers how everything rotted in a pit. In this land, living to reclaim freedom from corrupt officials was a struggle. Crouched over a body, he remembers his life as an assassin for freedom. With a bloodied hand, he understands that his profession was truly only one thing: fleeing from the end that was always on his heels in the dark city streets. He ran and kept running without looking back, searching for a way out. But the end of a run is not always an exit to a safe place. Sometimes it's just a dead end where danger patiently awaits him. The end of a run is not always an exit to the freedom he seeks. His opponent this time is a clear and relentless powerhouse in front of him, someone he doesn't even dare to imagine facing in a direct combat. Surrounded by a sinister aura, he feels powerless before his enemy. Instinctively, he knew his life had come to an end that day. His enemy attacks with overwhelming force, and he has no way to escape it. And yet, he feels something different, something that could change his destiny. He wonders what that small circle of light that just appeared is. Somehow, that circle looks like that place he knows well, the tangled alleys of crowd that always gave him an escape from the violence. He attacks with a powerful punch, breaking the ground and creating an opening. A hole opens in the ground, and he throws himself into it to escape the imminent danger. His opponent follows him through the hole, and the chase continues underground. With a quick spin, he throws a dagger at his enemy to stop him. He decides to call that circle by a name that represents him very well now. He calls it a hole, a place of escape and survival amidst the chaos. The dagger hits the Black Bride, but she manages to dodge at the last second. The blow grazes her but isn't enough to stop her. It's the talent of a sewer rat that finds a way to live even in the filth. He remembers that his brothers used to call him that when he was a child. The Black Bride calls him a genius for his ability to escape and survive. A drop of blood drips from her blade after the boy's precise attack. She admits that he managed to escape her path in that decisive second, but she questions him about what he will do now that he's injured and cornered. He realizes she is a much more overwhelming opponent than any other, But the Black Bride not only avoided a fatal injury, but also counter-attacked. Now, just moving a little makes his ribs hurt as if they're going to break. With the slightest chance of victory gone, the wise choice would be to surrender. Even if it ends in humiliation, he knows it's the smartest decision. As long as he keeps his life, he can always have another chance later. But he holds his sword firmly and refuses to give up on that fight. With his eyes shining, he proudly declares that he is a member of Caravan. And for him, there is no option as cowardly as surrender at that moment. The announcer is shocked that a bronze managed to injure the undefeated queen. He can't believe the boy plans to continue fighting in that state. With his eyes shining, he realizes he is witnessing the birth of a star. The announcer shouts to the crowd that there are only 10 seconds left for victory. With the countdown, the tension in the arena increases with each passing second. The two fighters face each other, ready for the final confrontation of the match. The ancestor's spirit carefully watches the final movements of the fight. He wonders what a true genius is and how they behave in battle. A powerful blow hits the arena wall, kicking up dust and debris. Geniuses are those who find a way, no matter the difficulty. They always find an answer to the impossible challenges they face, and with calm, they can overcome any obstacle that comes their way, leaving their deeds forever engraved in history as great legends. But he laments that his relative's talent does not reach the level of a genius. His body was born frail, and his talent for martial arts is quite mediocre. With clenched teeth, the young man endures the pain and exhaustion of the battle. This is the limit he was born with, and it cannot be easily changed in any way. But there are those in the world who are even more praised than geniuses. Those who shake the world and leave behind great legends to be told. These people are known by all as true heroes of their era. The spirit then calls his relative by his full name, Arhan Caravan. Even alone after losing everything, he never gave up or surrendered to despair. Even in a deep pit where light could not reach, he never let go of his sword. With eyes shining with pride, he calls him his beloved relative, and with a shout, he says that his relative has the qualities of a true hero. The boy attacks with a powerful blow that collides with the Black Bride's defense. She observes him with a surprised and admiring look at his sheer determination. The two pull apart and prepare for the final attack of that intense fight. With a furious shout, he declares that his relative has the qualities of a hero. With a bright blue aura, he attacks with all his remaining strength. He wonders if this was how it felt to fight, with all the power he possessed. The young man moves with incredible speed towards his opponent. She comments on the strange way his body moves, as if it were a dance. With a final blow, he hits the Black Bride squarely with his sharp sword. With a victorious smile, he spits blood but doesn't care about the pain he feels. The woman staggers back from the impact of the powerful blow she received. The spirit says he fell a little short, but shouldn't be discouraged by it. The fight ends, and both fall to the ground, exhausted and injured from the battle. The announcer shouts that Liam, the little gladiator, has won the match. With the victory, he is promoted to the silver level under the blessing of the goddess Lepri. The crowd goes wild with the rookie's unexpected victory in the arena. With a bloodied face, the boy looks at his opponent fallen on the ground. The Black Bride stares at him in silence, still surprised by the result of the fight. She thinks that when she picks up a sword, it's hard to hold back and fight calmly. Some call it talent, others madness, but she knows what it really is. It's pure violence, and she hadn't felt so excited in a very long time. With broken daggers and an injured body, she looks at the winner of the fight. Now she is curious about the little gladiator Liam and his great power. A voice calls to her and says that this wasn't what they agreed on, and they can't pay her. Sitting on a throne, a man gives her one last chance to fulfill the agreement. If she wants to receive the promised dragon sword as a reward for everything, with eyes red with fury, he orders her to do it right now. The Black Bride looks at the boy fallen on the ground and makes her final decision. With a sigh, she says that those people are disgusting and despicable. She decides it would be better to stay away from that place for a good while. With a quick movement, she uses a teleportation ability and disappears His eyes widen in surprise as he feels a new presence in the arena. A blue aura envelops the arena, and the woman reappears elsewhere out of nowhere. She can't believe what she sees and wonders if she's having some kind of hallucination. Suddenly, the ancestor's spirit appears before her, floating in the air. With a smile, the ghost says that this was unexpected for him too. He doesn't know if it's because his relative lost consciousness or for some other reason, but he realizes that the young girl from the east can see him clearly. The spirit explains that in the east, there are rare shamans with strong divine power. He is impressed that she has talent with the sword and in the spiritual world. In her eye, she clearly sees what is known to all as the sword of the heart. This is the mark of a master swordsman that is only achieved at the end of the path. She remembers the legend of Carlos, who reached the pinnacle of swordsman with his power. He earned his title by manifesting 10 swords, but now she sees something different. Before her are not just dozens, but hundreds of swords floating in the air. The number only increases, moving into the thousands of shining blades. The quantity is so large that the swords completely cover the sky around her. With her mouth open, she wonders what kind of powerful being is before her. The ghost says she is not yet ready to receive the answer in her heart, but he guarantees that the girl will one day reach the land where all blades rest. Then, with a smile, the ancestor says he will wait for the day they meet. And before disappearing completely, he calls her by her real name, Seal Yoon. The black bride stands still with an injured shoulder, still processing everything that happened. She remembers an old legend about the kingdom of the sword that reaches the heavens, and thus they reach the land of the immortals, a paradise of pure and complete happiness. Her master used to say he wouldn't regret it if one day his family reunited there. Back in the present, she realizes with wide eyes that the legend was true. With a shocked look, the woman confirms to herself that this place really exists. Then she shouts in awe at what she saw and calls that being the god of the sword. Sometime later, the scene changes, showing us the large arena from the outside. We see a sign with writing on a door that seems to be a recovery room. From inside the room, a female voice calls with a very polite, "Excuse me." Our protagonist is in bed recovering and asks what she means. The woman introduces herself as Seal Yoon and says she wants to follow him to learn more. She explains that her dream is to reach the end of the sword's path, and this is the fastest way. With a serious and determined look, the young woman then asks if he will allow it. The boy wonders if it's a trick and why she, who is stronger, would make such a request. The spirit appears and tells his relative not to worry, as it's something natural. He explains that when the boy lost consciousness, she felt his presence. With a conceited smile, the ancestor says she was completely captivated by him. The old man boasts that in the old days, many became his followers just by seeing his shadow. The ghost then looks to the side with a more serious and thoughtful expression. With a slightly more melancholic tone, he says that sometimes he feels sad. Our protagonist watches him, confused, not understanding the sudden change in mood. The ancestor says that at his age, the boy should be experiencing the joys of life and not chained to brutal battles and a past full of bad things, and much less to a destiny that forces him to cling to all of this to survive. The old ghost then wonders what they can do about this situation, because once a path is chosen, one must leave all regret behind. He reminds him that as the heir of Caravan, there is no place for those who look back. Therefore, the ancestor tells him to judge whether the swordswoman's value is real or not. The young man thinks that she is a prodigy that his master recognizes and who favors him. He knows that someone like her will help him grow and achieve his own goals. With everything decided, he bows to the woman and calls her by the name of Seal Yoon. The boy introduces himself as Arhan and says he welcomes her as his journey's neighbor. The woman smiles gently and says she is also looking forward to working with him. And so the scene changes once more, showing us the city's arena from the outside. A short time later, we see the two traveling together in a cart along a road. The boy then says that what he's about to say might sound a little strange to her. He asks her not to misunderstand, but they need to clarify something first. The young man says he has complicated circumstances that he cannot talk about. With a nervous expression, he tells the woman that he cannot be her boyfriend. A completely awkward silence then takes over the cart. He says he knows she doesn't have that intention, but the lives of young people are uncertain. That's why he just wanted to be cautious and ask for her understanding in advance. The woman says it's a reasonable concern, but he doesn't need to worry. With a cold look, she informs him that he is not her type at all. The boy is shocked and speechless, while the spirit laughs at the situation in the background. She explains that she likes tall, muscular men and despises thin, weak ones. The woman says he seems too soft, and that he is not her type at all. With a smile, she then asks if the young boy wants her to keep talking. Embarrassed, the boy says that's enough, and the spirit disappears in shame. Relieved, he says he also wants to ask something as the cart continues its journey. He asks about other neighbors, and she says a knight moved in recently. With a smile, the boy says he's sure she'll get along well with him, because besides being skilled, the knight also has a great personality. The scene then shows the man standing in the middle of a pool of blood and several bodies. With a cold look, he holds an enemy, and the boy describes him as a good person. Sometime later, the two arrive on foot at the territory of the caravan family. Our protagonist asks if that is all the woman's luggage, and she confirms. She says that a sword and food for one day are enough for her to travel. The young man comments that her luggage has shrunk, but it seems to have grown. And the scene shows us the new daggers he carries attached to his leg. He explains that since his sword was damaged, he took the opportunity to get spares, and luckily, his earnings increased with the promotion, and he could buy armor. The boy praises the quality of everything in Firma, the great city of metallurgy. He sighs about it being expensive, but the spirit tells him not to complain about equipment. Finally, the two arrive at a stone tower, and he says that's where he lives. But as they get closer, they see a large mansion and a bloodied man. The two are shocked, and the boy seems to suddenly remember something important. The man greets them amidst several bodies and calls the young man Master Arhan. Ashamed, he says that some guests arrived and he hasn't cleaned everything up yet. With a smile, he says the lady must be the new neighbor the young man mentioned. Nervously, the boy tells Sir Patel to just relax and take a breath. The woman observes the whole scene with a serious and analytical look without saying anything. The camera then focuses on the bodies lying on the ground and the blood scattered everywhere. Our protagonist panics, realizing the terrible first impression. In front of the mansion, he thinks that, as expected, this is not a normal place. Once inside the house, Patel begins to explain everything that happened earlier. He says that some unwanted guests showed up for an unexpected visit, but fortunately, most of them retreated, and it rarely turned into a serious fight. The problem started a week ago, with several men attacking them in the forest. People of a different nature from the others began to attack the village relentlessly, but today, they attacked with everything, as if they were completely determined. So he inevitably had to spill some blood to stop them, and with the information he gathered, they are definitely not common bandits. They call themselves the Red Wolf Brotherhood, a very intimidating name. The boy comments that the mix of color and animal is like the orders of knights. Patel explains that names like that carry the identity and meaning of the group, and because of that, he finds this whole situation deeply unpleasant, because this is not a tradition that honorless bandits should dare to imitate. This is another reason for them to be cautious, and the young man asks why. He explains that using such a name means the group is very large, or that their leader is so strong that he fears no knight who faces him. The scene shows a strong, tattooed man who seems to look down on everyone. The boy thinks that the more he hears about it, the stranger everything seems. But the spirit thinks that this sounds like a banquet prepared just for him. With a dark smile, the ancestor sees this as a great opportunity, and with his eye glowing, he tells his relative to finish off all those worms. The boy sighs, as his master was quiet, and he was already expecting something like this. He thinks that they even attacked Patel, and now he must face them alone. The spirit says that a body of steel only gets stronger the more it is forged, and this is the best chance for him to digest the power of the fang, and he guarantees it. If he can do it alone, he can finally extend his own path. Back to the conversation. The three continue sitting in the living room of the large mansion. Patel then says he has a question to ask his young master Arhan. With his eyes shining, the boy asks if he knows where their hideout is. The scene then changes to a mountain range, at night under the light of the bright full moon. At night, some men from the Red Wolf Brotherhood walk through the forest. One of them complains that he'll never understand his commander's strange taste. Another man says this is nothing new, and that his tastes have always been like that. One of them speculates that he must have been interested in the rumors of a dark mage. But his companion says that's just a ghost village falling to pieces. He complains that he wants to go back to the last village because there was no place like it. Thanks to the commander who eliminated the men, they could have fun with the woman. With a wicked smile, he says that if they had stayed there, he'd have 10 wives by now. Sticking his tongue out, he says that just thinking about it gets him all excited. He complains about the boring place and says he's at his limit since he hasn't seen a woman in a long time. Suddenly, a red liquid splashes through the air in a swift and fatal motion. Our hero appears with a blue glow in his eyes and eliminates one of the bandits. Another man calls out to him and asks why he stopped talking mid-sentence. The boy turns the torch and doesn't understand what his companion is trying to say. As he turns, he sees the hooded boy in the midst of his friends' bodies. With a shocked and scared look, he is left speechless by the scene before him. Completely terrified, he screams, wondering what the heck that is. In the blink of an eye, the young man hits his leg with a quick and precise strike. The man falls to the ground, screaming in pain, not understanding where the fatal attack came from. He tries to react, but it's too late to do anything against the boy. The sole survivor is shocked by the speed and wonders if he is the so-called mage. A blade is placed at his neck, and our hooded protagonist faces him. The young man criticizes him for announcing his position with torches and not being ready for an ambush. With his eye glowing, he says the subordinates are nothing special, and so he eliminates another one of the bandits without any hesitation or mercy. The man screams in pain as the boy watches him with a cold and distant look. With his hand on the enemy's mouth, he tells the man to swallow his screams of pain because he has no desire to hear the desperate cries of a piece of trash. With tears in his eyes, the bandit realizes that he's not a mage, but a boy. Our hero asks why a brat would have eyes like those on his face, and with a cold voice, he tells the man to cooperate if he wants to keep his ankles. Back at the mansion, Patel asks in shock if he really asked for the hideout. The young man confirms and says that knowing their fighting style and habits would be better. With a worried look, Patel asks if he plans to finish them all off by himself. The boy remains silent, confirming his intentions to his friend's astonishment. Patel slams the table and shouts at him not to be foolish and do something so dangerous. He says that if they attack, the best option is to defend the place with all their might. And since they insulted the honor of the knights, an order will move to eliminate them. Furious, he says there's no reason for the young man to risk his life and starts to cough. The man coughs hard, worrying the boy and the woman who watch him in the room. Worried, the young man asks him to calm down and offers to help him up. Patel says he knows how important the village is, but those men are not ordinary, and they surely must have some trick hidden up their sleeve to use later. Our protagonist apologizes but says that this is a promise he cannot make. Meanwhile, in the forest, the young hero observes the body of one of the bandits. With the hood covering his face, he prepares for what is to come in the darkness. The ancestor's spirit watches his relative with an attentive and serious look. He comments that it seems the boy has already gotten used to the laws of the Iron Kingdom. With a quick movement, the young man summons a blue energy from his hand for the battle. He says he just doesn't plan on leaving any loose ends behind on his mission. The ghost then asks if he's sure that's okay, because if the information is correct, their leader is no ordinary bandit. Among the knights, he is called a runaway dog, a deserter knight. With a dark look, the spirit reveals that the leader is a sword walker. The boy says he has already lost to a walker twice and knows the danger he's in. The ancestor asks if that's a problem, but the young man smiles confidently. He extends his hand and prepares to face the challenge that is to come. With a determined look, he says of course not and advances into battle. The next day, we see a bloodstain on a clean, white cloth. The scene then cuts to Seal Yoon, who is lying on a sofa, resting. She remembers her old master lying in bed, pale and very sick. He says that young Patel will be her bodyguard because everyone trusts him. With a smile, he says that a knight who never betrays and is dedicated is incredible. And with a serious look, he asks the boy to stay by his side and protect them. Patel wakes up from a nightmare, sweating coldly as if reliving a bad moment. With his eyes wide, he awakens from his sleep to the voice of the woman beside him. The young woman calls him and says they have guests arriving at their mansion now. With a hand on his head, he complains that of all times, his body is like this. She says it wouldn't make a difference, and he asks, confused, what she means. Suddenly, a banner with an elephant appears in front of their mansion. A group of mounted knights quickly approaches the large house. The knights stop their horses and prepare to question the two. The man who seems to be the leader asks the two, with a serious and firm look. He says they are looking for a runaway dog that is in the region. Vice, Captain Macon of the Order of the Yellow Elephant asks if they know anything. Patel and the woman find themselves surrounded by the knights and their imposing presence. He then says that is all he knows about the Red Wolves, and he asks if they came all this way just to finish off that group. The Vice Captain confirms and says that news of the dog being on the border arrived. Furthermore, he had the audacity to call his group the Red Wolves and tarnish their honor. But the knight says that their information is not particularly useful at the moment, because besides somewhere in the hills, they don't know their base or their size. Patel apologizes for not being of more help and observes the knights. The Vice Captain stares at him and says his face is familiar, but a little different. The woman turns her face to the side, looking a bit uncomfortable with the situation. The knight then remembers Patel's name and stares at him with a very serious look. With a wicked smile, he says he remembers him as a famous sword walker. He was a model of an honorable and just knight, known as Patel the Green Stag. But with a mocking smile, he provokes him for being abandoned after falling ill. The knight calls him a sick dog and humiliates him in front of everyone. He says he will have a fun story to tell when he returns to the capital. The man then notices the woman staring at him and asks if she is dissatisfied. Patel tries to explain, but the knight interrupts him with a sharp question. With a look of contempt, he asks if the man is envious of his wings. He criticizes him for clinging to empty dreams when he's already near the end, and with a bloodied hand, he says that if he had reached his power, he wouldn't be like this. The knight says it's time for him to accept that he was never chosen by fate, and with a cold look, he advises him to stop playing the victim and accept it. Suddenly, the woman moves to attack, but Petal stops her with a hand on her arm. He calls her by name and tells her not to do anything rash at that moment, because she knows that in this kingdom, power is the law, and she says she'll be fine. The Vice Captain mocks him, saying he's a dedicated and lucky caretaker. Satisfied with the humiliation, he says he had his fun and that it's time to go. He orders his troop to advance to hunt the runaway dog in the mountains. And so the knights depart, leaving Patel and the woman behind at the mansion. Elsewhere, we see our protagonist with an aura of fire around him. Patel remains silent, watching the knights distance themselves in the darkness. With a hand on his forehead, he sighs and says he is a stubborn man to the end. Suddenly, he realizes something and wonders where young Master Arhan is. He notes that with all the noise in front of the mansion, he should have come out. The woman also notices the boy's absence and remains silent with a serious look. With wide eyes, Patel realizes what happened and is completely shocked. He screams in desperation upon realizing the young man went to the bandits' den. Elsewhere, a torch burns on a rainy night, and a man complains about his luck. One of the lookouts complains about being on guard duty on a dark night like this one. He yawns and sees his companions returning tired from the night patrol. Suddenly, one of them approaches silently, and the lookout doesn't understand what he sees. He asks why the man is walking without a torch and alone in the darkness. The man begs for his life and says he did what he was told and led him there, but before he can finish the sentence, a blade hits him squarely in the face. The lookout then falls to the ground, lifeless, from a deep cut to his neck. The other lookout looks at his companion's body, and then at the assassin. With a single spear thrust, our hero eliminates the two remaining lookouts. Their bodies fall to the ground without any chance to react to the surprise attack. The boy thinks that with each moment, he becomes more convinced of his previous choice. The former owner of the Fang was an assassin who couldn't compare to elite knights or to experienced arena fighters, as he was not a powerhouse of strength. In a fair fight, his chances of defeat were almost guaranteed against them. But if it's not a match but a fight for survival, the story changes. It doesn't matter if you use dirty tricks or take advantage of openings in the enemy's guard. We see several men fallen on the ground after being surprised by the assassin. With a dagger in hand, the young man prepares to eliminate everyone in his path. He approaches a large tent that seems to be the center of the camp. Carefully, he enters the place without making any noise so as not to be noticed. The rule is simple: whoever gets the other's throat first is the one left standing. An assassin dedicates himself only to this and never takes success for granted. He always plans his victories under the assumption that he might fail, and this way of fighting is perfect for someone who doubts everything, like the boy. A man with a headache from drinking too much tries to recover from the effect. Suddenly, a dagger hits his forehead in a swift and very silent blow. The young man attacks from a distance with precision, eliminating the enemy without being seen. With a bloodied hand, he says that this fighting style fits him perfectly. He observes the bodies of his enemies scattered around the dark camp. Blood stains the walls of the tent, showing the efficiency of his attacks. Now it's time to hunt the wolves, and he turns to the leader who is waiting for him. The leader of the Red Wolf Brotherhood opens his eyes, sensing a new presence. With a serious look, he notices the smell of blood that fills the entire place. The bandits' camp is silent under the faint light of the torches. A man enters the tent and is shocked by the scene he finds inside. He screams in horror upon seeing the bodies of his companions scattered on the floor. He can't believe the men he was drinking with just a little while ago are all gone. Panic takes hold of him as he realizes that everyone in the other tents is gone too. He notices there's no sign of resistance and that everyone passed without knowing what hit them. Terrified, he realizes this is no ordinary person and that he needs to flee quickly. But the leader appears behind him and asks why he is making so much noise. The man stammers as he turns and sees his boss standing before him with a cold look. The leader of the Red Wolf Brotherhood, Murphy, glares at him with anger and contempt. With his eye red with fury, he prepares to punish the man for his cowardice. He says the smell of blood was already tickling his nose, and that someone had some fun. With a red aura emanating from his body, he prepares for battle. He doesn't know what rat crawled in here, but it will be worth sinking his teeth into with a quick movement. He advances towards our masked protagonist, and with a powerful attack, he delivers a series of blows against the young hero. Our protagonist observes the count of the blows and prepares to counter-attack. With his sword in hand, he waits for the right moment to strike back. The spirit asks his relative what he thinks of the enemy's path. With his chin in his hand, the boy thinks for a moment and answers, "Was, master." With a determined look, he declares with absolute certainty that he can take him down. The path is the core that makes a sword walker a superhuman. Extending it through the body grants physical abilities incomparable to a beginner, and projecting it outward allows one to sense enemies and exert amplified power. In other words, the path is a sensory organ and a powerful tactical weapon. Therefore, the completeness of the path reflects the true level of a walker, and by observing an opponent's path, it's possible to measure their real skill. The boy says the leader's skill is poor compared to Patel's and Seal Yoon's. Patel's path was like a massive wall with countless firm branches. Seal Yoon's was graceful and overwhelming, like a giant, fierce wave. But the leader's path has only 6 branches, and they are very unstable and weak. To be honest, it's hard to believe that he and the other 2 are on the same level. The spirit smiles and says that's natural, as there's a big difference between them. The ancestor says the girl is a genius, and that Patel is at the pinnacle of walkers. With a proud smile, he praises his relative for surviving both of them. But the spirit reminds him that's not what decides life or the end in battle. The boy tells him not to worry, as he is fully focused on the mission. With a glowing look, he assures his master that he won't let his guard down. In the main tent, Murphy sits with a serious and imposing expression. One of his men stammers and asks what they should do in this situation. With his face sweating in fear, he says the rumors about the mage seem to be true, but the leader shouts for him to shut up and get down before he splits him in 2. With a furious look, he calls them a bunch of useless bums and pieces of trash. The men tremble in fear before their boss's fury and intimidating presence. He tells them to look carefully and says that this doesn't look like dark magic, because they were all eliminated with a single, precise blade to a vital point. And with a serious look, he concludes that this is the work of a single trained assassin. The man is shocked, and the leader says his path didn't catch him, and he has already hidden. He orders all remaining men to track him down without leaving any trace. And with a threatening look, he says that if they fail, he'll throw them all to the dogs. Afraid, the men agree and prepare to obey their boss's orders. They run out of the tent to start the search for the mysterious assassin. Murphy wonders who sent him, as hiring someone of this caliber isn't easy. He speculates if it was the family of the woman he took from the last village they attacked, or the survivors of the merchant company he eliminated for fun. He concludes that it doesn't matter, as it means he'll have more entertainment. His plan is to capture him, torture him, and then find the client who hired him. Suddenly, a bloodied head is thrown in front of him, catching him by surprise. The body of the man he just sent out falls lifeless at his feet. With his eyes wide in surprise, Murphy is speechless at the enemy's audacity. In a swift move, he stands up and prepares for the combat that is to come. The leader charges furiously at the assassin who invaded his camp, but he soon realizes that the 2 men who went after him are also gone. He wonders when exactly that happened and becomes even more furious. Furthermore, he notices that the entire camp is in complete darkness. All the bonfires and torches have been extinguished, leaving the place in total blackness. He shouts in rage, calling the young assassin a sneaky little rat. Suddenly, he sees a bright light and turns to face his opponent. A red eye glows in the darkness, revealing the presence of his enemy. Murphy advances with a powerful attack, but is surprised by the boy's speed. The young man moves like a shadow in the darkness, easily dodging the blow. He narrowly dodges the attack and prepares for his counter-attack. With a precise movement, he hits the leader's arm with his sharp sword. Blood splatters through the air, and the leader feels the pain of the deep cut in his arm. He realizes that for half a second, his head would have been taken off by the blow. Surprised, he wonders what kind of thing is this that moves like the darkness. The boy says he is an assassin from Crowd who wanders the alleys in search of freedom. With his eyes glowing blue, he declares that the darkness of the world is his ally. The scene then changes, showing us a beautiful mountainous landscape under the full moon. Far away, Patel and Seal Yoon walk hurriedly through the dark forest. The man breathes with difficulty, showing the effort he's making to continue. The woman says he's pushing himself too hard and suggests a brief rest, but he refuses because their leader is a deserter and the young man can't face him. He says that no matter how talented the boy is, he is still a newly sprouted seed, and he needs more time to grow before he can face a walker. The woman says that's not true, and Petal looks at her, confused by her statement. She states that the little gladiator is not a mere seed as he thinks, and with a serious look, she says that his talent has already begun to bloom. The scene shows us the boy's silhouette, with a blue glow in his eyes in the darkness. Back in the fight, Murphy says that judging by his appearance, he must be an expensive assassin. With a furious look, he asks once more who sent him there. He speculates if it was a merchant caravan or one of the women he discarded. With a glowing eye, the boy says it could be the darn yellow elephants. With his eyes glowing, he says it would be better for the boy to answer quietly, but he warns that if the young man resists, that could have its own kind of fun. Suddenly, the full moon in the sky begins to shine with a strange intensity. The bandit leader notices a shadow rapidly approaching the camp. Our hero walks towards him with his daggers in hand, ready for battle. With sweat running down his face, Murphy is shocked to see the boy's figure. He starts to laugh, not believing that the one who eliminated his men was this young man, and with a look of contempt, he scoffs at the boy for daring to come after his neck. With a hand on his face, he says that this is honestly very ridiculous to him. With his teeth clenched in rage, he prepares to finish the boy right there. He says the plans have changed and advances with a powerful red aura. He doesn't know how the boy escaped his path, but now there's no way to run. With a furious shout, the bandit leader attacks with all his brute force. He promises he's going to tear the young assassin to pieces and finish him off right there. And with a desperate shout, he tells the boy to go to the great beyond. Once and for all, a strange, shining object appears in the air during their intense confrontation. Under the light of the full moon, the darkness of the world becomes the hero's greatest ally. The leader attacks with his sword, but the young man moves with incredible speed. Murphy can't believe he lost sight of him, even though he never took his eyes off him. Suddenly, he feels a cut on his shoulder and doesn't understand how he was hit. Blood splatters from his wound, and he is shocked by the boy's skill. In the blink of an eye, the young man hits several vital points on the leader's body. Each blow is fast and precise, leaving the man with no chance of defense. With his mouth open in pain, he can't believe what is happening. He shouts in rage, calling the boy a little rat, and tries to fight back. But it's useless, because even with his incomplete path, he can't stop him. He realizes the boy isn't canceling his path, but rather making it disappear. And in that split second, he pierces his path and slips through the gap. It's as if the young man is poking holes in his defense with each blow. The boy thinks that in all his missions, he was never the strongest of all, and so, to face overwhelming enemies, he always needed help. He remembers his companions walking by his side on the dark streets. That's why he had to borrow the strength of his comrades to win. And the first step for that was to display his presence to attract attention. He exaggerated his breathing, the rustle of his collar, and even his footsteps. Every trace of himself was amplified to focus the enemy's attention. And the moment the enemy became aware and focused on him completely, he erased everything at once, completely disappearing from their perception. This extreme contrast in perception causes sensory confusion in the opponent. With sweat running down his face, the man is disoriented by the boy's tactic. He swallows hard, feeling the disadvantage, and the pressure of the battle growing. A drop of sweat falls onto his blade, showing the nervousness of the moment. With this opening, the young man attacks, eliminating his enemies with precision and coldness. The man feels the pain of the blow and realizes he was deceived by the boy's strategy. He falls to the ground lifeless, and the young assassin continues his journey in the darkness. This is how he becomes the darkness itself, a silent and lethal predator. With his eye glowing in the night, he merges with the shadows and hunts his prey. Back in the fight, he hits the leader with a series of fast and precise blows. But even with the advantage, he feels that something is wrong in this battle. He wonders if, even being a walker, the fight can be so one-sided. And it can't be just because of the memories of the assassin he summoned. He realizes that if the leader is hiding something, he needs to act fast. The ground cracks with the force of the impact, and the battle intensifies even more. He decides to crush the man's throat before he can reveal his trump card. With his eye red with fury, the leader realizes the young assassin's intention. The boy advances with speed, but the leader faces him with a defiant look. Suddenly, an explosion of energy occurs, and both are thrown back. With a dagger in hand, the young man prepares for what is to come in the battle. With a wicked smile, The leader reveals his true form, a fierce beast. The scene then changes, showing us a dark and silent forest at night. One of the knights says he's curious about something as he rides through the forest. He asks the vice captain if they really need so much force for one dog. He thinks that even with a large group of bandits, their force is an exaggeration. The knight observes his vice captain from behind, awaiting an answer to his question. The leader says maybe so, but that the superiors decided it was appropriate. With a smile, he says the reason for this large mobilization is very simple. He reveals that so far, they have already silently sent 6 knights on the mission, and to everyone's surprise, all 6 knights were completely eliminated. The knight is shocked, and his leader says that Murphy may be a fallen mutt, but when it comes to eliminating people, he is a beast with excellent instincts. He then asks if the boy knows what his epithet was when he was still a knight. With a wicked smile, he reveals that Murphy was known as the Mad Berserker. It's said that he once caught a fatal blow from an assassin with his own teeth. The boy wonders what kind of monster has a bite force like that. Back in the fight, the leader bites the young man's blade with impressive force. Our protagonist is shocked by the strength and savagery of his opponent. With a powerful attack, the bandit leader delivers a series of violent blows. The boy defends himself as best he can, but the enemy's strength is overwhelming and hits him. The ground cracks with the intensity of the attacks, and the battle becomes even fiercer. Our hero realizes that the power and speed of his attacks are different. He thinks that if he hadn't dodged that blow, he would have been split in 2. The leader advances with a red aura emanating from his body and attacks with fury. With clenched teeth, the young man prepares to block the powerful blow. The impact is so strong that the ground around them shatters into pieces instantly. Blood splatters through the air as the 2 exchange blows in a deadly dance. The battlefield becomes a chaos of dust and destruction with the fight. With his eyes shining with determination, the boy looks for an opening in the leader's defense. Murphy glares at him with eyes red with fury and advances with a devastating attack. The 2 exchange blows at high speed in a fight for survival. The forest around them seems to tremble with the intensity of their confrontation. Breathing heavily, the young man kneels to catch his breath from the battle. He wonders if this is possible, as his fighting style was wild before. But now he has gone beyond that and become a true crazed beast. With red eyes and a sinister aura, he is a beast thirsty for blood. His physical abilities have skyrocketed, and his path has become even more sinister. The spirit explains that sometimes mutants like that appear in his battles. Their path reflects a nature of pure bloodlust, not conviction, and to defeat him, he needs to digest the memories of the dagger and complete his path. Our protagonist remains silent, processing his ancestors' words. He takes a deep breath and prepares for the next step of this intense fight. The spirit says there is only one way to harden steel that is not yet tempered. And with a shout, he tells the boy to crash against his opponent with everything he's got. The 2 collide in a powerful attack that generates a large explosion of energy. With his eyes glowing with rage, the bandit leader snarls like a beast. He attacks with his sword, but the young man dodges with an agile and precise movement. The 2 exchange blows at a frantic pace, and the battle continues without stopping. The boy ducks to dodge a blow and prepares for a counter-attack. The leader shouts in fury and attacks with all his strength, but the young man defends himself. He knows his defense will have to rely on dodging and redirecting the blows, and if he can't go for the bone, he'll have to tear off the flesh first. With a quick movement, he attacks with his dagger in a precise and accurate blow. The blade hits the leader, who can't defend himself in time from the surprise attack. Dust rises with the impact, and the battle continues with increasing intensity. Murphy feels the pain of the cut, but doesn't let it shake him and continues to fight. With a backward leap, the boy distances himself from his opponent and prepares for more. The 2 face each other in the middle of the arena, ready for the next confrontation. With a powerful attack, the young man hits the leader squarely with his sharp sword. The leader feels the blow, and his eye twitches in pain and surprise at the boy's strength. He looks at the starry sky for a moment, processing what happened. With an incredulous look, he can't believe he was injured in that way, because no matter how thick his skin is, there will always be a weak spot, and with a gleam in his eyes, the boy prepares to exploit this weakness. The leader senses the danger, and his eye widens in surprise at the young man's charge. He manages to dodge just barely, and wonders how the boy managed to do that. With a clenched fist of rage, he prepares for a powerful counter-attack. Our hero smiles upside down, ready for what is to come in the battle. The leader hits him with a powerful punch that throws him back with force. The boy spits blood, but doesn't let the pain of the blow he received shake him. Dust rises with the impact, and the fight continues with impressive intensity. Fallen on the ground, the young man smiles with clenched teeth despite his injuries. He thinks he almost passed out from that single blow he received from the leader, and now he's on the ground while his opponent remains standing before him. But with a determined look, he prepares to receive the next blow, and with a shout, he hits the leader with a dagger in his left eye again. The weapon sinks deep into the man's eye, who cannot defend himself in time. He screams in pain and holds his bloodied face with an expression of agony. With an injured eye, he glares at the young assassin with a look of pure fury. A red aura emanates from his body, and he prepares for a devastating attack. The boy thinks that blinding him was the right decision, but his aura only gets more vicious. The wilder he gets, the stronger he becomes, and one blow could be the end. Besides, that is his last sword, and it's already damaged from the battle. His instincts scream at him to retreat and survive to fight another day, but precisely because of this, he gets up and prepares to continue. The leader advances with a furious attack, but the young man stands firm in his position. The two collide in a final confrontation that will decide the fate of this battle. With a determined smile, he says he cannot run and must stand firm. He remembers that the free city of Crowd was once stripped of its freedom, and for that someone needed to bleed, and he chose to be that person. He honed his skills in the arena and threw himself into life or death fights without hesitation. But now he has been pushed to the limit with no opening to save himself. He sees himself at a public execution with nothing left to do to escape. A man on horseback shouts for the crowd to look at the butcher's fate. He says that is the end that awaits those who dare to challenge the nobles and the order. The crowd watches the scene with fear and resignation before the power of the oppressors. The man tells them to lower their heads and submit, as that is the only comfort. With a wicked smile, he delights in the suffering and submission of the people. But the people in the crowd cry and grind their teeth in anger and helplessness. In his memory, the young assassin remembers his own imminent execution. With his hands tied, he prepares for his tragic end at the hands of his enemies. He remembers how he was captured and taken to his hopeless fate. He sighs and accepts that there is nothing more he can do to save himself, and yet, something happens, and a sword appears to cut his bonds. He falls to the ground, surprised and confused by the unexpected turn of events. With a determined look, he gets up and says he can't let it end like this. With a shout of fury, he prepares to fight against his oppressors. He doesn't fear meeting his end in an alley or being crushed into dust in battle. But being crushed by power without lifting a finger is something he will never accept. He must become the resisting darkness to ignite the flame of freedom. He shouts to the citizens of Crowd not to bow their heads before oppression, and with his sword in hand, he urges them to show the world their will to fight. The people in the crowd watch him with a new light of hope in their eyes. He tells them to fight if they try to take their rights or insult them again. The men in the crowd prepare for battle with weapons in hand, ready to fight. With a quick movement, he attacks the guards, and the rebellion begins in the city. He shouts that Crowd no longer lives up to the name of Free City, and everyone knows it. The people watch the scene with a mix of fear and admiration for his courage. The battle spreads through the city streets, and the fight for freedom begins. With a shout, he tells the people not to look away from the truth before them, and with all his strength, he urges them not to submit to tyranny any longer. With a final blow, he eliminates another of his enemies in the fight for freedom. He shouts that even lost in a dense fog, seeing nothing in front of him, One must keep walking forward without looking back or giving up, and everything he did in that place, with his sacrifice and his constant struggle. The people in the crowd watch the scene with a mix of fear and admiration. With clenched fists, he prepares for his tragic end at the hands of his enemies. The men in the crowd look at him with a new light of hope in their eyes. He sees himself at a public execution with nothing left to do to escape. With a bloodied arm, he remembers his companions supporting him, and with a determined look, he says that all of this is for just one thing. With a sigh, he reveals that his fight is for the freedom of his oppressed people. The people hold him tightly, showing their support and new determination. They surround him, ready to fight by his side for the cause he defends. With clenched teeth, one of the men prepares for the battle to come. The entire crowd shouts in unison for the freedom that was taken from them. With raised fists, they unite in a chorus of hope and resistance. And even wounded, they continue to fight with all their strength and courage. The noble who oppressed them is shocked and speechless at the people's rebellion. With blood gushing, they shout for the freedom they so desire to reclaim. With a serene look, he watches the awakening of his people with a sense of accomplishment. And with a smile, he confirms that this is the true face of his city. Crowd. The scene then changes, showing us a beautiful view of the city under the sunlight. Back in the fight, the bandit leader advances with a powerful red aura. Our protagonist faces him with a dark energy emanating from his body. With eyes red with fury, Murphy attacks with all his brute force. The boy prepares for the confrontation with a blue aura and says to the darkness, with an intense blue glow, he promises that he will carry on the will he left behind. With a powerful attack, he delivers a series of blows against the bandit leader. Murphy is shocked and cannot believe what is happening in front of him. He realizes with horror that his path has been completely shattered by the attack. With a glowing eye, the boy hits him squarely, and the fang is fully assimilated.